Tina couldn't breathe properly after Martin left the kitchen. Her entire body had gone cold. The baby. No. Not baby anymore. Eli was 5 now. 5 years old. 5 years of secrets. 5 years of guilt. 5 years of staring into a child's face that looked more and more like Anderson every day. And now. Martin knew she never told him. Panic crawled violently through her chest. Because suddenly everything felt fragile. Unstable. Dangerous. Tina gripped the kitchen counter tightly while memories crashed painfully through her mind. The hospital. The pregnancy test shaking in her hands. The realization she was carrying Anderson's child after he disappeared from her life completely. God. That period nearly destroyed her emotionally. She remembered crying alone in the bathroom whispering, "Please come back." But Anderson never came. And eventually. Fear replaced hope. Fear of raising a child alone. Fear of the criminal world swallowing Anderson completely. Fear that Eli would grow up loving a ghost. Martin entered her life at exactly the right moment. Or maybe the worst one. Because by the time Tina discovered she was pregnant, she already believed Anderson chose darkness over her. And Martin stayed. Helped. Protected. Supported. So Tina buried the truth. Buried it so deeply she almost convinced herself it was the right decision. Almost. But every time Eli smiled, she saw Anderson. Every time Eli frowned while thinking, she saw Anderson. Every time Rain made the little boy quiet and emotional, her heart shattered all over again. Because Anderson existed inside their son everywhere. And now. The truth was coming. Whether she wanted it or not. Meanwhile. Anderson sat alone inside his office staring blankly at financial reports he hadn't actually read for 20 minutes. His mind stayed trapped on Tina again. Always Tina lately. Victor entered casually carrying whiskey. "You're distracted." Anderson barely glanced upward. "I'm working." "You've been staring at the same page long enough to memorize it." Silence. Victor sat nearby. Then smirked faintly. "You saw her twice this week." Anderson's jaw tightened slightly. "She needed someone." Victor laughed softly. "No." A pause. "You needed her." The truth irritated him immediately because it was accurate. Anderson leaned back slowly in his chair. Exhaustion dragged beneath his skin heavily now. Ever since reconnecting with Tina, everything inside him felt unstable again. The violence. The possessiveness. The hope. God. Hope was the worst part. Victor studied him carefully. "You look alive again." Anderson looked away toward the city lights. "Alive isn't always good." Victor raised an eyebrow. "Meaning?" Anderson's expression darkened slightly. "When you care about something." Silence. "People can use it against you." The statement lingered heavily. Because in Anderson's world, love was weakness. Enemies exploited weakness mercilessly. Victor swirled whiskey slowly. "You think someone will hurt her?" Anderson's eyes sharpened immediately. The answer came too fast. "Yes." Victor noticed instantly. Interesting. The terrifying thing wasn't Anderson's fear. It was the certainty behind it. Like he already expected disaster. Like happiness around him automatically meant danger afterward. Victor leaned back quietly. "You know what I think." Silence. "I think you stopped believing you deserve good things a long time ago." Pain flickered briefly across Anderson's face. Because yes. Maybe. Still. Tina made him want impossible things again. Peace. Softness. Home. Things men like him lost the right to years ago. Anderson rubbed tiredly at his eyes. "I saw her smiling yesterday." Victor blinked slightly. Okay. She looked beautiful. Victor sighed dramatically. Oh God. You're hopeless. Anderson almost smiled faintly. Almost. Then suddenly, his phone buzzed against the desk. Tina. Everything inside him stilled instantly. Victor noticed immediately. That reaction is embarrassing. Anderson ignored him completely. The message was short. Can we meet tomorrow? His heartbeat became uneven immediately. Ridiculous. One message from her and suddenly breathing felt difficult again. Victor watched him carefully. Well. Anderson stared at the screen silently. Then typed. Tell me where. The next afternoon. Anderson arrived early. Of course he did. He hated himself slightly for it too. The small cafe overlooked the river quietly while soft music played beneath low conversation and clinking cups. Rain clouds gathered outside again. Always rain. Anderson sat near the back corner hidden from attention automatically. Old instincts. Dangerous life. Years of paranoia. He wore black today. Simple. Sharp. Beautiful enough that several women glanced toward him curiously when entering. He noticed none of them. Because the moment Tina walked inside, the entire world disappeared again. God. She looked nervous. Anderson stood immediately before realizing it. Tina stopped near the table clutching her purse tightly while emotion flickered across her face seeing him already waiting. Something warm spread painfully through Anderson's chest. Because nobody had ever waited for him willingly except her. Still. Even now. Hi. Her voice sounded soft. Uneven. Anderson nodded once. Hi. Silence settled awkwardly afterward. Not because feelings disappeared. Because there were too many. Tina finally sat down slowly. Anderson noticed immediately how tightly she held her hands together. Fear. Something was wrong. What happened? The direct question startled her slightly. You always know. Anderson frowned. Know what? When something's wrong with me. The sadness in her voice hurt unexpectedly. Because yes. He always did. Even years apart. Tina looked down briefly. Then whispered. There's something I never told you. Anderson's chest tightened instantly. The seriousness in her tone unsettled him immediately. What is it? Tina's eyes filled slowly. Fear mixed with guilt moved visibly across her face now. And suddenly, Anderson felt something terrible coming. Something life-changing. Tina. Her breathing became shaky. Then finally. There's a reason I could never fully move on from you. Anderson stared at her silently. Because deep down, he already knew that. What he didn't know was why she suddenly looked terrified to admit it aloud. Tina's fingers trembled harder now. I tried to tell myself it didn't matter anymore. Pain flashed across her expression. But every time I looked at him. Anderson froze. Him? Her voice cracked softly. I saw you. The world stopped. Actually stopped. Anderson stared at her blankly. Then slowly. Very slowly. Understanding began creeping across his face. No. No. Tina's tears finally slipped free. And in a barely audible whisper. He's yours, Andy. Silence. Complete silence. Anderson stopped breathing. Because suddenly, every single thing inside him shattered all at once. Anderson didn't speak. Couldn't. The cafe noise faded into nothing around him while Tina's words replayed violently inside his head. He's yours, Andy. No. No. His chest tightened so painfully it almost felt impossible to breathe. Tina sat across from him trembling softly while tears slid silently down her face. Anderson stared at her like he no longer understood reality. A child. His child. 5 years. 5 entire years. His throat moved slightly. Then finally. What? The word came out broken. Small. Nothing like the feared man everyone knew. Tina's crying worsened immediately. Because hearing the shock in his voice shattered her too. I found out after you left. Anderson blinked once slowly. Like his mind physically struggled to process the sentence. Pregnant. Alone. Waiting. God. A terrible image suddenly hit him, Tina crying alone in some bathroom while he drowned himself in violence somewhere else. Something cracked painfully inside his chest. His voice failed briefly. Then softer. You had my son. Tina nodded shakily. The movement nearly destroyed him emotionally. Anderson leaned backward slowly in his chair. Everything inside him felt unstable now. Memories crashed violently through his mind. Tina crying in the rain begging him to stay, his promise to come back, leaving her anyway, all the years wasted, all the birthdays missed, all the nights his son existed without him knowing. God. God. His hands started trembling slightly. Anderson quickly clenched them into fists beneath the table. Tina noticed immediately. Fear flashed through her face. Andy. But Anderson wasn't angry at her. Not really. He was angry at himself. At life. At every terrible decision that led here. 5 years. His son existed for 5 years and Anderson knew nothing. The pain of that realization was unbearable. What's his name? The question came quietly. Carefully. Like he was afraid speaking too loudly might shatter something. Tina swallowed hard. Eli. Eli. Anderson repeated the name silently inside his head. His son had a name. A real little person somewhere breathing and laughing and existing. Emotion climbed viciously into his throat. How old? 5. 5. 5 birthdays. 5 years of scraped knees and nightmares and laughter. 5 years stolen from him. Anderson shut his eyes briefly. Because suddenly, the grief felt overwhelming. Not grief for death. Something worse. Lost time. Time he could never get back. Tina cried harder seeing his expression. I wanted to tell you. His eyes opened immediately. Raw pain lived inside them now. Then why didn't you? The question wasn't cruel. That made it worse. Tina looked down helplessly. Because you disappeared. The truth landed brutally. You vanished completely. Anderson looked away. Guilt spread violently beneath his skin. Because yes. He did disappear. I thought maybe you were dead. Her voice trembled harder now. Then later. I heard rumors about you. Violence. Criminals. Blood. Fear. Tina wrapped trembling arms around herself. I was scared. Anderson's chest tightened painfully. Not at her. At himself. Because he turned into exactly the kind of man she feared raising a child around. I didn't know if you'd even want him. The sentence shattered him completely. Anderson stared at her in genuine horror. What? Tina cried openly now. You hated yourself so much back then. God. That nearly broke him. Because she truly believed there was a possibility he'd reject his own child. And honestly, a younger broken version of Anderson might have. Not because he wouldn't love the child. Because he would have feared ruining him. Anderson rubbed violently at his face. Trying to breathe properly. Trying to think. But all he could picture now was a little boy with Tina's smile. Or worse. His eyes. Does he know about me? Tina shook her head slowly. Pain spread across Anderson's face instantly. No. The word came out like grief. Tina's tears fell harder. He asks questions sometimes. God. That sentence physically hurt. What kind of questions? Tina looked down. Why other children have fathers around? Something inside Anderson broke completely then. Not quietly this time. Not controlled. Broken. Because suddenly, he realized his son grew up wondering why nobody stayed. Exactly like him. Anderson leaned forward abruptly, gripping the edge of the table tightly. Emotion crushed him from every direction now. I missed everything. The heartbreak in his voice devastated Tina. Because she had never seen him like this before. Not violent. Not cold. Destroyed. I'm sorry. The apology sounded small against years of damage. Tina cried harder immediately. Please stop apologizing. But Anderson couldn't. Because guilt was swallowing him whole. His son existed. And Anderson wasn't there. Not for first steps. Not for first words. Not for nightmares. Nothing. He lost all of it. Tina watched devastation move visibly across his face. Then quietly whispered. He has your eyes. Anderson froze completely. God. That sentence nearly stopped his heart. His son had his eyes. Tears burned unexpectedly behind Anderson's vision. He looked away immediately. Ashamed. Because nobody saw Anderson Kane cry. Nobody. But this. This was different. This wasn't weakness. This was grief mixed with love too large for his body suddenly. Does he? Anderson swallowed painfully. Does he like me at all? The vulnerability in the question shattered Tina completely. Because underneath all the fearsome reputation, Anderson was terrified of rejection from a child who didn't even know him yet. Tina wiped tears shakily from her face. He doesn't know you. Pain crossed his expression instantly. Then softly she added. But he would. Hope flickered violently inside him. Dangerous hope. Anderson leaned back slowly again, trying desperately to steady himself emotionally. Then suddenly, something terrible occurred to him. Martin. His expression darkened immediately. He knows. Tina froze slightly. Anderson noticed. When did he find out? Silence answered first. Then quietly. Recently. Coldness slid instantly through Anderson's chest. Because suddenly, this wasn't just emotional anymore. This was dangerous. Martin knowing meant complications. Manipulation. Threats. The men already hated Anderson enough. Now there was a child involved too. Anderson's voice lowered dangerously. What exactly does he know? Andy. He leaned forward slowly. Every trace of softness disappeared beneath terrifying calmness. Tina. He knows Eli is mine. Silence. Then finally. Yes. The atmosphere changed instantly. Not rage. Protectiveness. The lethal kind. Because suddenly, Anderson no longer only had Tina to lose. Now there was his son too. And anyone threatening what belonged to him emotionally was about to discover exactly why the underworld feared Anderson Kane so much. Anderson didn't remember leaving the cafe. One moment he sat there drowning in shock. The next, he was driving through rain-soaked streets unable to breathe properly. A son. He had a son. The words repeated endlessly inside his head like something unreal. His hands tightened painfully around the steering wheel while emotions crashed violently through him. Grief. Love. Shock. Rage. Hope. Fear. God. Fear most of all. Because suddenly, there was someone else in the world who could be hurt because of him. Victor answered immediately when Anderson called. You sound unstable. I have a son. Silence exploded through the phone. Then. What? Anderson laughed once. Brokenly. Like a man seconds away from emotional collapse. Tina had my child. Victor went completely silent afterward. For the first time in years. Victor Moretti genuinely had no words. Anderson drove one-handed while rubbing violently at his face. I missed 5 years. The devastation in his voice unsettled even Victor. Because Anderson sounded wrecked. Not angry. Wrecked. Where are you? Victor asked carefully. I don't know. Meaning. I'm driving. Rain hammered loudly against the windshield. Anderson's breathing remained uneven. She thought I wouldn't want him. That sentence hurt Victor unexpectedly. Because beneath all the violence and fear surrounding Anderson, the man loved too deeply. That was always his real weakness. Victor leaned back slowly in his chair. Are you going to see him? Anderson's grip tightened harder. Yes. The answer came instantly. No hesitation. No doubt. Anderson would burn the entire world before staying away from his son now. Tina barely slept that night. Fear consumed her completely. Not fear of Anderson hurting Eli. Never that. She feared something worse. What if they loved each other immediately? What if Anderson looked at Eli the same way he used to look at her? Like he discovered something precious after years of loneliness. God. That possibility terrified her emotionally. Because deep down, she already knew it would happen. Eli was too much like Anderson. Quiet when hurt. Gentle beneath stubbornness. Soft-hearted despite pretending otherwise. Sometimes Tina caught herself staring at her son while memories of Anderson physically ached inside her chest. And now, those two worlds were about to collide. Her phone buzzed softly near dawn. Anderson. Her heart immediately became uneven again. The message was short. I want to see him. Tina stared at the screen silently. Then slowly typed. Okay. Another message came almost immediately. Today. The desperation beneath that single word shattered her. Because yes. Of course he wanted today. 5 lost years probably felt unbearable now. Tina swallowed slowly. Then replied. Come this afternoon. Long silence followed. Then finally. Thank you. The gratitude inside those words nearly made her cry again. Because Anderson sounded emotionally overwhelmed already. And he hadn't even met Eli yet. That afternoon. Anderson stood outside Tina's house unable to move. Rain clouds covered the sky again while soft wind rustled through nearby trees. His heartbeat sounded violent inside his chest. This was ridiculous. He faced armed men without fear. Walked through blood and violence for years without hesitation. But now. His hands trembled slightly standing outside a quiet home. Because inside. His son existed. Anderson rubbed both palms slowly against his dark coat trying to steady himself. Then the front door opened. Tina stepped outside quietly. The moment she saw him, her chest tightened painfully. Because Anderson looked terrified. Not cold. Not dangerous. Terrified. Like one wrong moment might completely destroy him emotionally. You came early. Anderson almost laughed weakly. I couldn't stay away. The honesty hurt. Tina looked at him carefully. You okay? No. The immediate answer nearly broke her heart. Anderson swallowed hard. Then quietly. What if he hates me? God. That question. Tina stepped closer slowly. He doesn't know you enough to hate you. Pain crossed Anderson's face anyway. Because he understood the deeper meaning. He also didn't know how to be a father. Tina touched his arm gently. You don't have to be perfect. His eyes lifted toward her immediately. You still think I can do this? The vulnerability in his voice shattered her completely. Because despite all the years, part of Anderson still looked at her like she held answers for surviving life. Tina nodded softly. Yes. The simple faith in her voice almost destroyed him emotionally. Then suddenly, a small voice echoed from inside the house. Mom. Anderson froze instantly. Everything inside him stopped. Tina looked toward the doorway quickly. 1 second. But Anderson's breathing already became uneven. Because that voice. His son's voice. God. Nothing prepared him for this. Tiny footsteps approached quickly. Then a little boy appeared near the doorway holding a toy car loosely in one hand. Anderson stopped breathing completely. The child looked up curiously. Dark hair slightly messy. Small serious eyes. Anderson's eyes. Exactly his eyes. The world tilted violently. Because suddenly, Anderson wasn't looking at possibility anymore. He was looking at his child. Real. Breathing. Existing. Eli blinked curiously toward the unfamiliar man standing outside. Then frowned slightly. That expression too. God. Even the frown looked painfully familiar. Anderson felt something inside his chest physically crack open. Love. Instant. Violent. Unavoidable. The kind that terrified men because it arrived stronger than reason. Eli stepped closer toward Tina quietly. Who's that? Tina looked between both of them nervously. Anderson couldn't speak. Couldn't move. Because his son stood right there. Close enough to touch. Anderson Kane, feared by criminals, respected by monsters, suddenly looked emotionally helpless before a 5-year-old child. Tina's voice trembled softly. Eli. The little boy looked up at her. Then back toward Anderson again. Curious. Careful. Anderson's throat tightened painfully. Because Eli looked at him without fear. Without judgment. Just curiosity. God. That somehow hurt most. Tina swallowed hard. Then whispered the sentence changing all their lives forever. Baby. Her fingers tightened gently around Eli's shoulder. This is your father. Silence. Complete silence. Eli stared blankly for several seconds. Anderson's heartbeat became unbearable now. Then finally, the little boy tilted his head slightly. And in the softest voice imaginable asked, "You came back." Anderson forgot how to breathe. Eli stood near the doorway staring at him curiously while soft afternoon light filtered through the rain clouds behind him. You came back. The question shattered something deep inside Anderson instantly. Because no child should ask that like they already understood abandonment. God. He sounded hopeful. Careful. Like disappointment was something he already learned too young. Anderson's throat tightened painfully. Tina stood frozen beside Eli watching emotions destroy Anderson in real time. The feared men who terrified entire criminal networks now looked emotionally helpless before one small boy. Anderson swallowed hard. Then finally whispered. Yeah. His voice sounded rough. Unsteady. Eli looked at him for several seconds silently. Thinking. Studying. Anderson's heart pounded violently the entire time. Then suddenly, the little boy stepped closer. Not afraid. Just curious. Anderson nearly broke apart emotionally from that alone. Because Eli trusted too easily. Just like Tina used to. Eli tilted his head slightly. You look like me. The innocent observation almost made Anderson laugh and cry at the same time. Tina pressed trembling fingers against her lips quickly. Because hearing her son say that aloud after years of secrecy felt overwhelming. Anderson crouched slowly until he reached Eli's height. For the first time in years, he looked genuinely vulnerable. Not dangerous. Not cold. Just emotionally terrified. Eli studied him openly. Then frowned thoughtfully again. You have my eyes. God. That did it. Anderson looked away briefly because tears suddenly burned viciously behind his vision. Nobody prepared him for this. Nobody warned him love could hurt this badly. When he looked back, Eli still watched him curiously. Completely unaware he was healing and destroying Anderson simultaneously. What's your favorite color? The random question startled Anderson slightly. Black. Eli immediately wrinkled his nose. That's boring. Tina accidentally laughed softly. The sound warmed the room instantly. Anderson stared at Eli in stunned silence. Because for one terrifyingly beautiful moment, everything felt normal. Like this could have been their life all along. Eli looked toward Tina again. Mom, can he stay for dinner? The innocent question hit Anderson harder than bullets ever had. Dinner. Such a small, ordinary thing. Something fathers did every day without realizing how precious it was. Anderson looked at Tina instinctively. Fear flickered across her face briefly. Not fear of him. Fear of how fast this was becoming real emotionally. Still. She nodded softly. If he wants to. Anderson couldn't answer immediately. Because deep down, nobody had ever invited him into something this gentle before. A home. Dinner. Family. God. He wanted it so badly it physically hurt. Eli suddenly grabbed Anderson's hand. Just naturally. Like children did. Anderson froze completely. Warm little fingers wrapped around his scarred hand effortlessly. No hesitation. No fear. The contrast nearly shattered him emotionally. Because these same hands once held guns. Blood. Violence. And yet, his son held them like they were safe. Trusting him instantly. Anderson stared at Eli's tiny hand in complete silence. Then something terrifying happened. He realized he would kill anyone who ever hurt this child. Not metaphorically. Not emotionally. Literally. The protectiveness hit him that fast. That violently. Tina noticed the emotional shift immediately. The dangerous softness. God. Anderson already loved Eli too much. It showed all over his face. Eli tugged lightly on his hand. Come. Anderson followed automatically. Like the child already owned pieces of him. Maybe he did. The house smelled warm. Vanilla. Food. Rain. Anderson stood awkwardly near the living room while Eli ran ahead excitedly talking about toy cars and cartoons. Tina watched quietly from the kitchen doorway. Emotion tightened painfully inside her chest. Because this scene. This exact scene. Was something she secretly imagined 1,000 times alone. Anderson sitting inside their home. Eli talking endlessly. Rain outside. Family. The sight hurt beautifully. Anderson noticed framed drawings covering part of the wall. Messy crayon art. Small handwritten letters. One drawing immediately caught his attention. A child's drawing of a woman. A little boy. And a tall man standing beside them. The man's face wasn't detailed. Still. Anderson understood instantly. His chest tightened painfully. Eli noticed him staring. That's you. Anderson looked toward him slowly. You drew me. Eli nodded proudly. I didn't know your face, so I guessed. God. The sentence nearly destroyed him. Tina looked away, quickly wiping tears before either of them noticed. Because she remembered the day Eli drew it. He asked, "Do you think Daddy is tall?" And Tina cried in the bathroom afterward where he couldn't see. Anderson stared at the drawing quietly. A family he never got to have. A child imagining him before even meeting him. The grief of lost years crushed him again instantly. Eli walked closer. Mom said you were far away. Anderson's throat tightened. Yeah. Why? Silence. Tina froze in the kitchen. Because neither of them prepared for this conversation yet. Anderson looked at Eli carefully. At those eyes identical to his own. Then softly. I got lost. The answer settled quietly in the room. Eli thought about it seriously. Then simply asked. Did you find your way back now? God. Children shouldn't be able to say things like that. Anderson physically felt his heart crack open wider. He looked toward Tina instinctively. Her eyes already shimmered with tears too. Then Anderson looked back at his son. And for the first time in years, the truth came easily. Yes. His voice broke slightly. But I'm trying. Dinner terrified Anderson more than violence ever had. Which was ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. He'd negotiated with killers. Survived gunfire. Buried bodies without trembling. Yet sitting at Tina's dining table while Eli happily explained toy cars made his heart beat painfully uneven. Because this mattered. Too much. Eli sat beside him swinging his legs beneath the chair while talking nonstop. This one is faster than the red one, but the wheels broke because I crashed it into the wall. Anderson listened like every word was sacred. Maybe it was. 5 years. He missed 5 years of this. Tiny stories. Small laughs. Childish nonsense that suddenly felt more valuable than everything Anderson built in the criminal world. Tina quietly placed food onto the table while secretly watching him. Anderson looked southwest, out of place here. Too sharp. Too dangerous. Too emotionally overwhelmed. Still. For the first time since she met him again. He also looked peaceful. Not completely. But softer. Like sitting beside Eli loosened something painful inside him. Eli pointed toward Anderson's plate suddenly. You don't like vegetables either. Anderson blinked slightly. No. Eli gasped dramatically. Mom says I'll die. Tina rolled her eyes immediately. I said you should eat properly. Anderson accidentally laughed. A real laugh. Low. Warm. The sound stunned all three of them. Because Anderson almost never laughed anymore. Not genuinely. Eli stared at him with wide eyes. Do it again. Anderson frowned slightly. What? That sound. Tina covered her smile quickly behind a glass. God. This was unreal. Anderson shook his head faintly. But something warm spread painfully through his chest anyway. Because Eli looked fascinated by him already. Not scared. Not cautious. Interested. Like Anderson was someone worth knowing. The thought emotionally wrecked him quietly. Eli suddenly held up his toy car proudly. Can you fix this? Anderson took the broken toy carefully. His large scarred hands looked strange holding something so small and harmless. Eli watched him closely. You have big hands. Anderson's chest tightened unexpectedly. His son noticed everything. Just like Tina. Anderson examined the toy quietly. Then reached into his coat pocket pulling out a small knife. Tina stiffened instinctively. Old fear. Old instincts. Anderson noticed immediately. Pain flickered across his face before disappearing. He closed the knife slowly. Then softly. Sorry. The apology hurt Tina instantly. Because he looked ashamed. Like he suddenly remembered what kind of life he came from. Eli leaned closer curiously. That's cool. Tina immediately spoke. Eli. What? It is. Anderson almost smiled again. Almost. Then carefully fixed the wheel using only his hands. Eli's eyes widened dramatically when it rolled properly afterward. You fixed it. The joy in the little boy's voice nearly destroyed Anderson emotionally. Because nobody had ever looked at him with pure admiration before. Not fear. Not respect. Admiration. God. His son looked proud of him already. Eli immediately climbed onto Anderson's lap without warning to grab the toy. Anderson froze completely. The entire world stopped again. Warm little body. Tiny heartbeat. Trust. Complete trust. Eli settled comfortably like this was natural. Like fathers and sons always sat this way. Anderson forgot how to breathe. Tina watched the scene silently while tears burned painfully behind her eyes. Because Anderson looked terrified to move. Like happiness, this fragile might disappear if he breathed wrong. Eli kept playing happily, unaware he was emotionally destroying the grown man holding him. Mom says I talk too much. Anderson finally found his voice. She's wrong. Eli grinned instantly. I know. God. That smile. Anderson physically felt love hit him harder. The child looked so much like Tina when smiling. But the eyes. Those were entirely his. A dangerous lump formed in Anderson's throat suddenly. Because for the first time in his life, he understood why parents feared losing children more than death itself. Eli leaned lazily against his chest while rolling the toy car across Anderson's arm. Are you staying tomorrow too? The innocent question crushed him. Tomorrow. The little boy already assumed he'd stay. Anderson looked toward Tina instinctively. Her expression softened painfully. Then she quietly looked away first. Because deep down, she wanted him to stay too. That realization terrified her. Anderson looked back toward Eli carefully. If your mom says it's okay. Eli immediately turned toward Tina. Please. God. Tina hated how hopeful both their faces looked. Because suddenly, it felt dangerously close to becoming a real family. And that scared her. Not because she didn't want it. Because she wanted it too much. Still. She nodded softly. Okay. Eli cheered instantly. Anderson's chest tightened violently again. The happiness in the child's reaction physically hurt him. Because it should not matter this much to a boy whether his father stayed one extra day. That realization carried unbearable sadness underneath it. Eli suddenly looked up at Anderson again. Then frowned thoughtfully. Why do you look sad all the time? The question stunned the room silent. Children. Always brutally honest. Anderson stared at Eli for several seconds quietly. Then softly asked. Do I? Eli nodded seriously. Like you forgot something important. God. That nearly shattered him. Because yes. He forgot 5 years. Anderson looked down briefly. Then finally whispered the truth. I think maybe I did. Eli thought carefully about that answer. Then simply wrapped tiny arms around Anderson's neck. Just naturally. Like love came easily to children. Anderson stopped breathing entirely. Because no one hugged him without fear anymore. No one touched him gently anymore. Except Tina. And now. Their son. Emotion crashed through him violently. His arms slowly tightened around Eli carefully. Protectively. Anderson buried his face briefly against the child's hair. Rain tapped softly outside while warmth filled the small house quietly. And for one fragile, terrifying moment, Anderson Kane finally understood what home was supposed to feel like. Which meant losing it someday would probably kill him. Anderson stayed until Eli fell asleep. That alone felt dangerous. Because every extra minute inside this house made leaving harder. Eli eventually curled against Anderson's chest on the couch midway through a cartoon, tiny fingers still loosely gripping his shirt. Anderson hadn't moved for nearly 40 minutes. Not because he was uncomfortable. Because he was afraid to break the moment. Tina stood quietly near the hallway watching them while soft television light flickered across the room. Her chest hurt. God. This was exactly what she imagined during lonely nights years ago. Anderson half asleep on the couch. Their child safe against him. Peace. Simple peace. Something life kept stealing from both of them. Anderson looked up slowly when he noticed her staring. Neither spoke immediately, because the scene between them already said too much. Tina finally whispered, "You can put him in bed." Anderson looked down at Eli carefully. The little boy slept peacefully against him like he belonged there naturally. Anderson's expression softened painfully. "I don't want to wake him." The quiet honesty shattered Tina emotionally. Because he sounded attached already. Too attached. She walked closer slowly. Then crouched beside the couch carefully. "You really love him already?" Anderson looked at her like the statement itself was ridiculous. "He's my son." The answer came instantly. Fiercely. Like loving Eli wasn't even a decision. Tina's eyes burned unexpectedly. Because hearing that after years of fear healed something inside her quietly. Anderson looked back down at Eli again. Then softly whispered, "He trusts me." The wonder in his voice nearly broke her. Because Anderson genuinely sounded shocked by it. Like he couldn't understand why something innocent would choose him willingly. Tina touched Eli's small hand gently. "He's a good judge of people." Pain flickered across Anderson's face immediately. "No." His voice lowered. "Tina, you don't understand what I've become." The sadness in those words filled the room heavily. Tina stared at him silently. Because yes. She saw darkness inside him now. Violence too. But sitting here watching Anderson hold their sleeping son with unbearable tenderness. She also saw something else. A man who still loved too deeply despite everything trying to destroy that part of him. You know what Eli sees. Anderson looked toward her quietly. A man who looked terrified to disappoint him. The truth hit brutally. Because yes. That was exactly how Anderson felt all evening. Terrified. Not of enemies. Of failing this little boy somehow. Tina's voice softened. "You kept checking if he was cold." Anderson looked away briefly. Embarrassed. "You noticed that?" "I notice everything about you." The sentence escaped before she could stop it. Silence followed immediately afterward. Heavy. Dangerous. Anderson slowly lifted his eyes back toward her. God. The way he looked at her still ruined her emotionally. Like she mattered too much. Like he never stopped loving her for a single second. Tina's heartbeat became uneven again. Because suddenly, this room felt too intimate. Too close to becoming something neither of them knew how to survive anymore. Anderson looked exhausted tonight. Not physically. Emotionally. Like happiness itself overwhelmed him. He carefully brushed Eli's hair back softly. Then whispered something almost too quiet to hear. "I missed everything." The grief inside those words devastated Tina completely. Because no matter whose fault the past was, that pain was real. Anderson missed first steps. First words. Nightmares. Birthdays. Everything. Tina sat beside him slowly. Close enough now to hear Eli's tiny breathing between them. "I used to imagine this." Anderson looked toward her immediately. "This." Tina nodded softly. "You holding him." Pain crossed his face instantly. "You shouldn't have had to imagine it alone." The guilt in his voice hurt her. Because deep down, she blamed herself too. Maybe if she searched harder. Maybe if she trusted him more. Maybe if fear didn't control her decisions. But the truth was uglier. Life broke both of them before they were ready to love each other properly. Tina looked down quietly. "I was scared." Anderson understood immediately. Not just of him. Of everything surrounding him. The violence. The rumors. The darkness. Still. One question haunted him now. "Did you love Martin?" Tina froze slightly. The question sounded calm. But emotionally dangerous underneath. She answered honestly anyway. I tried to. The response hurt more than Anderson expected. Not because she loved Martin. Because she tried. She genuinely tried to build a life without him. Anderson looked away toward the rain outside. You should have had something normal. Tina almost laughed sadly. Normal. Silence. Then softly. I don't think I ever wanted normal. The honesty between them tonight felt terrifyingly raw. Anderson studied her carefully. You wanted me. The statement sounded broken. Disbelieving. Tina met his eyes quietly. Yes. God. That nearly destroyed him. Because after everything. After abandonment and years apart. She still answered yes without hesitation. Anderson leaned back slowly against the couch. Emotionally overwhelmed again. Tina. His voice sounded rough now. Dangerous. Not angry. Worse. Too full of feeling. Tina's breathing slowed painfully. Because she knew that tone. That tone always came before Anderson said something devastatingly honest. He looked toward Eli sleeping peacefully between them. I don't know how to stop loving you. The confession shattered the room into silence. Tina physically felt her heart break open again. Because deep down, neither did she. Rain whispered softly against the windows while years of unfinished love sat heavily between them. Anderson looked at her with terrifying vulnerability now. No matter what I became. His fingers tightened slightly around Eli protectively. You were still the only thing that ever felt good in my life. Tina's eyes filled instantly. God. No one had ever loved her this intensely. Not safely. Not normally. But completely. And that was the problem. Loving Anderson always felt like standing too close to something beautiful and destructive at the same time. Tina looked toward Eli sleeping peacefully. Then back at Anderson. At the men she never truly stopped loving. And suddenly, the terrifying truth became impossible to ignore anymore. This no longer involved only their hearts. Now there was a child between them too. A family. Fragile. Complicated. Real. And somewhere far away across the city. Martin Vale sat alone in darkness, already planning how to destroy it before it fully formed. Martin had never considered himself cruel. Calculated. Yes. Ambitious. Absolutely. Possessive. Maybe. But cruel? No. At least not until Anderson Kane returned. Because before Anderson, Martin controlled everything perfectly. Business. Emotions. Relationships. Even Tina's sadness eventually became manageable. Predictable. She smiled less than other women. Loved more cautiously. Carried old heartbreak quietly. But she stayed. That was enough. Then Anderson came back. And suddenly Martin started losing things he didn't even realize were fragile. Tina's attention. Her emotional presence. Her softness around him. The worst part? Martin saw it happening in real time. Every time Anderson's name appeared on her phone, she looked alive again. That destroyed him slowly. The whiskey burned sharply down Martin's throat while rain battered the penthouse windows behind him. Midnight covered the city in darkness while files spread across his desk silently. Photographs. Reports. Surveillance. Everything about Anderson Kane. Martin stared coldly at one particular image, Anderson carrying Eli asleep against his chest earlier that evening. The photograph physically enraged him. Because the child looked comfortable there. Safe. Like he belonged to Anderson naturally. Martin crushed the photograph slowly between his fingers. No. He refused to lose everything this way. He spent years building his position beside Tina. Years. And Anderson returned for a few weeks and suddenly looked like home again. Unacceptable. A knock interrupted the silence. Come in. One of Martin's private investigators entered carefully. Nervous. Smart man. You asked for the Kane files. Martin extended one hand calmly. The investigator placed a thick folder onto the desk. There's more. Martin flipped through pages slowly. Money laundering. Weapons. Murders. Criminal operations. Blood. Enough darkness to bury Anderson forever publicly. Martin's eyes sharpened slightly. Police connections. Yes. And judges. Several. Interesting. Very interesting. Martin leaned back quietly afterward. Because suddenly, a new possibility formed inside his head. If Tina wouldn't emotionally leave Anderson, then maybe Anderson needed to disappear again. Permanently. The thought should have disturbed him. Instead, it calmed him. That frightened him slightly. Meanwhile, Anderson woke before sunrise, still sitting on Tina's couch. Eli remained asleep against him peacefully. The little boy somehow migrated entirely onto Anderson during the night. Tiny fingers curled into his shirt, trusting him completely. Anderson stared down at his son silently. Emotion tightened painfully through his chest again. Because this still felt unreal. A child. His child. Anderson carefully touched Eli's hair softly. The little boy frowned in his sleep slightly before pressing closer instinctively. God. That tiny movement nearly emotionally destroyed him. Anderson spent years believing he was too broken for softness. Too violent for love. Yet somehow, this child accepted him instantly. Without fear. Without knowing anything ugly about him. Tina appeared quietly near the hallway wearing oversized sleep clothes and exhaustion beneath her eyes. She stopped the moment she saw them. Anderson holding Eli still looked unreal emotionally. Beautiful. Dangerous. Heartbreaking. Anderson looked up slowly. Their eyes met silently across the dim room. Then Tina whispered softly. You stayed. Anderson's throat tightened slightly. Yeah. The answer carried too much meaning. Because deep down, he wanted to stay forever now. That realization terrified him. Tina walked closer carefully. Then crouched beside the couch quietly. Eli slept peacefully between them. Their son. God. Even thinking those words felt overwhelming. Anderson watched Tina gently brush Eli's hair back. Then quietly asked. Was he difficult when he was little? The question hurt Tina unexpectedly. Because Anderson sounded genuinely sad about missing it all. He cried a lot during storms. Anderson's chest tightened instantly. Like him. Tina smiled faintly. But he also laughed easily. Something soft flickered across Anderson's face. Then quietly. Like you. Silence settled warmly around them afterward. Domestic. Gentle. Dangerous. Anderson suddenly realized something terrifying. He had never wanted anything more than this. Not money. Not power. Not revenge. Just this. A small family beside rain-covered windows. Peace. The realization emotionally wrecked him quietly. Because men like him rarely got peaceful endings. Tina studied him carefully. You're thinking too loudly again. Anderson almost smiled. You still know when I'm spiraling. Always. God. That word. Always. Anderson looked toward her slowly. Then softly. I don't want to leave. The honesty stunned both of them silent. Because the sentence carried too much weight underneath it. Not, I don't want to leave tonight. Worse. I don't want to leave this life. Tina's heartbeat became uneven immediately. Because deep down, she didn't want him to leave either. That frightened her. Anderson looked back down at Eli sleeping peacefully. Then quietly whispered. I could have had this. The grief inside those words broke her heart completely. Because yes, they could have. Without the violence. Without the abandonment. Without fear. They could have built something beautiful together. Life just destroyed them before they learned how. Tina touched Anderson's hand gently. Instantly. Naturally. Anderson froze slightly beneath the warmth. God. He missed this too much. Tina's voice trembled softly. You still can. The words hit him like a gunshot. Hope exploded violently through his chest again. Dangerous. Reckless. Terrifying. Anderson slowly lifted his eyes toward her. You believe that? Tina looked at him quietly. At the men carrying scars life carved into him. At the father holding their son like something sacred. At the boy she never truly stopped loving beneath all the darkness. Then softly. Yes. Anderson stared at her in complete silence afterward. Because nobody ever looked at him with faith anymore. Nobody except Tina. And that was exactly why losing her would destroy him completely. Across the city. Martin Vale stared at Anderson's criminal files with cold, unreadable eyes. Then finally made a phone call. The man answering sounded sleepy. Martin's voice remained calm. Controlled. Deadly. I need a problem removed. Silence followed briefly. Then. How permanent? Martin looked toward the photograph of Anderson holding Eli. Jealousy spread viciously through him again. Then softly. Very. Tina knew it was wrong the moment she kissed him back. But God. She had missed him for too many years to stop herself. It happened slowly. Dangerously slowly. After Eli finally woke up and ran outside into the small backyard chasing rainwater with childish excitement, Tina and Anderson remained standing near the kitchen doorway in silence. The kind of silence filled with too much feeling. Too much history. Too much unfinished love. Anderson leaned against the counter quietly watching her move around the kitchen pretending to make breakfast. Pretending not to feel him watching her. Pretending her heartbeat wasn't completely unstable. You're nervous. Tina almost dropped the mug in her hand. I'm not. Anderson's mouth curved faintly. God. That tiny almost smile ruined her emotionally. You still lie badly. The familiarity hurt beautifully. Tina looked down quickly. Because if she stared at him too long, she would do something reckless. Like kiss him. Like forgive him too easily. Like fall apart completely. Too late. She was already doing all three. Anderson watched her quietly for a long moment. Then softly. You're shaking. The concern in his voice made everything worse. Tina set the mug down carefully. I'm trying to think. About what? Her eyes finally lifted toward him. Whether this is a mistake. Pain flickered across Anderson's face instantly. Not anger. Just pain. Because yes. He thought about that constantly too. Still. He stepped closer anyway. Like both of them were helpless against gravity pulling them together again. What if it is? The question came low. Dangerously soft. Tina's breath caught. Because Anderson stood too close now. Close enough to smell rain and cigarettes again. Close enough to hear his breathing. Close enough to remember exactly how it felt being loved by him. That should scare you more. His eyes darkened slightly. It does. God. The honesty nearly destroyed her. Anderson reached toward her slowly. Giving her enough time to stop him. She didn't. His fingers brushed softly against her wrist where the old bracelet still rested. The one he gave her years ago. Anderson stared at it silently. You kept it. Tina's throat tightened painfully. Yeah. The emotion crossing his face afterward looked almost unbearable. Because she kept him too. All these years. In tiny invisible ways. Anderson's thumb slowly brushed across the bracelet. Then quietly. I used to imagine you throwing this away. The confession hurt her instantly. Never. Anderson looked at her then. Really looked. God. Tina forgot how terrifying his eyes became when emotions slipped through them openly. Love looked dangerous inside Anderson. Too intense. Too consuming. And that was the problem. She still wanted it anyway. Anderson's voice dropped softer now. I thought maybe you forgot me eventually. Tina laughed once. Brokenly. How? Silence crashed between them heavily. Because yes. How could she? He ruined ordinary love forever. Anderson stepped even closer. Close enough now that her body instinctively remembered his. Tina hated how natural that felt. How many times did you almost call me? He asked quietly. The question shattered her. Because she lost count years ago. How many times did you almost come back? She whispered back. Pain flashed across his face instantly. Too many. Far too many. Anderson lifted one hand slowly. Then stopped inches from her face. Control. He was trying to control himself around her. The realization emotionally wrecked Tina. Because underneath all the darkness, Anderson still feared hurting her most. Tina closed the remaining distance herself. Just slightly. Enough. Anderson's restraint snapped visibly. His hand finally touched her cheek softly. God. The tenderness nearly broke her apart. No one touched her like this. Like she mattered more than breathing. Like losing her would ruin them permanently. Anderson stared at her mouth for one dangerous second. Then another. Tina. His voice sounded wrecked now. Like loving her physically hurt. Tina's heartbeat became unbearable. Because she already knew what was about to happen. And deep down, she wanted it. After years of loneliness and pretending and heartbreak, she wanted him. Still him. Always him. Anderson whispered one final warning against her lips. If I kiss you. A pause. I won't know how to stop. God. That did it. Tina kissed him first. Softly. Desperately. Like years of missing him finally collapsed all at once. Anderson froze for half a second. Just one. Then suddenly, everything inside him broke loose. His hand moved into her hair instantly while he kissed her back with terrifying emotion. Not lust. Worse. Love. Starvation. Grief. Relief. The kiss felt like finding oxygen after drowning for years. Tina physically trembled against him. Because no one had ever kissed her like Anderson. Like she was home. Like she was the only soft thing left in his world. Anderson pulled her closer instinctively. Needing her closer. Always closer. God. He missed this too much. Tina's fingers curled tightly into his shirt while tears slipped down her cheeks unnoticed. Because kissing him again felt devastating. Beautiful. Wrong. Perfect. Anderson tasted heartbreak in every second of it. All the years lost. All the nights alone. All the love unfinished between them. The kiss deepened painfully. Emotionally. Like neither knew where one ended anymore. Then suddenly, a small voice echoed from outside. Mom. Both of them broke apart instantly. Breathing hard. Staring at each other in shock. Reality crashed back violently. Eli. Their son. The reason everything became more complicated now. Tina stepped backward too quickly, pressing trembling fingers against her mouth. God. What had they done? Anderson looked equally wrecked. His chest rising unevenly while love and panic battled visibly inside his eyes. Eli burst through the back door smiling brightly, holding a soaked toy car. Look. Neither adult answered immediately. Too emotionally destroyed. Eli frowned slightly, looking between them curiously. Why are you both crying? Silence filled the kitchen. Because neither of them knew how to explain this. How do you tell a child? We loved each other too much to survive it properly. Tina quickly wiped her face. Nothing, baby. But Eli looked unconvinced. Then slowly, his eyes shifted between them again. A tiny smile appeared afterward. Anderson's chest tightened instantly. Because suddenly, the little boy looked happy. Like he sensed something important without understanding fully. And somewhere deep inside Anderson, hope returned completely. Which meant losing Tina now would no longer hurt. It would destroy him. Martin arrived too early. That was the only reason he saw it. The black car rolled quietly toward Tina's house while rain softened into mist across the morning streets. Martin intended to apologize. Or maybe manipulate. Even he wasn't fully sure anymore. Everything inside him felt unstable lately. Jealousy made people ugly. And Anderson Kane was making him uglier every day. Martin stepped out of the car slowly, holding flowers in one hand. Then froze. The front curtains were slightly open. And inside, he saw them. Tina standing near the kitchen counter, still flushed and shaken. Anderson beside her, looking emotionally wrecked in the most intimate way possible. Too close. Too familiar. Too in love. Martin stopped breathing. Because instantly, he knew. Something happened. Then he saw Eli run happily between them, smiling. And suddenly, the entire truth hit him violently. Not logically. Emotionally. They already looked like a family. Martin's grip crushed the flowers slowly. Pain spread viciously through his chest. Not heartbreak. Humiliation. After years beside Tina. One night with Anderson, and she looked more alive than she ever looked with him. The realization poisoned him instantly. Inside the house, Anderson suddenly stiffened. Instinct. Danger. His eyes shifted toward the window automatically. Then immediately darkened. Martin. Tina noticed the emotional change instantly. What? Anderson's voice lowered dangerously. He's outside. The atmosphere changed in 1 second. All softness vanished. Tina's stomach twisted violently. No. But Anderson was already moving. Predatory calm replacing vulnerability instantly. Tina grabbed his wrist quickly. Andy. He looked down at her hand. Then at her face. Fear. She looked genuinely afraid now. Not of him. Of what might happen between them. Anderson forced himself to stay still. Barely. The front doorbell rang. Once. Coldly. Eli looked up curiously. Who's here? Tina swallowed hard. Her heartbeat painfully uneven now. I'll check. But Anderson caught her wrist again before she moved. His voice came quiet. Deadly calm. Did he ever hurt you? The question stunned her. Because the possessiveness behind it felt dangerous. Tina quickly shook her head. No. Anderson studied her carefully anyway. Like searching for hidden bruises. The doorbell rang again. Longer this time. Anderson's jaw tightened violently. Tina touched his chest softly. Please. God. That one word still controlled him too much. Anderson stepped backward slowly. But the darkness remained in his eyes. Tina opened the door carefully. Martin stood there smiling faintly. Too faintly. The flowers in his hand looked destroyed. His eyes immediately shifted past her shoulder. Toward Anderson. Silence exploded between them. Martin stepped inside slowly. Well. The calmness in his voice frightened Tina instantly. What a beautiful picture. Anderson leaned silently against the kitchen doorway. Cold. Unreadable. But Tina knew him now. Knew the violence underneath his stillness. Martin looked between them carefully. Then softly laughed. You kissed him. The statement wasn't a question. Tina's face paled immediately. Martin saw enough. And something inside him finally snapped. Not loudly. Quietly. The dangerous kind. Eli walked into the hallway, then holding the toy car happily. Martin. The child smiled naturally before noticing the tension. His small face frowned slightly. What happened? Martin stared down at the little boy silently. Then slowly looked back toward Anderson. Anderson met his gaze without blinking. God. Even standing there together. Eli looked too much like him. The eyes alone were enough to drive Martin insane now. Martin crouched slightly toward Eli. Why don't you go to your room for a minute? The softness in his voice felt fake. Anderson noticed immediately. Eli looked toward Tina uncertainly. She nodded quickly. Go on, baby. The little boy disappeared reluctantly upstairs. The moment he vanished, everything exploded. Martin looked toward Tina first. How long? Tina, Anderson warned quietly. Martin ignored him completely. How long have you been lying to me? Tina's eyes filled instantly. I never wanted to hurt you. Martin laughed. Actually laughed. Brokenly. You kissed him in your kitchen. The pain in his voice unsettled even her. Because Martin genuinely looked destroyed now. Anderson stepped forward slowly. Talk to her carefully. Martin's eyes snapped toward him instantly. There he is. Hatred spread openly across his face now. The criminal finally playing family. Anderson's expression darkened lethally. Tread carefully. Martin smiled coldly. Or what? Silence. Then softly. You already know. The threat settled heavily between them. Tina's heartbeat became frantic. Because she realized something terrifying. Neither man feared violence anymore. Martin looked toward Anderson with pure resentment. You disappear for years. His voice sharpened. Then suddenly walk back in and take everything. Anderson's eyes turned glacial. She was never yours. The sentence hit Martin like a physical blow. Because deep down, that was exactly what terrified him most. Tina loved Anderson in a way she would never love anyone else. Martin saw it now clearly. Anderson could destroy her emotionally. Yet she still moved toward him instead of away. That kind of love made rational men dangerous. Martin looked toward Tina again. Tears burned visibly in his eyes now beneath the anger. Was any of it real? The question hurt her immediately. Because yes. Some parts were real. The comfort. The companionship. The gratitude. That smile genuinely unsettled Anderson. Then Martin quietly reached into his coat. Tina froze instantly. Anderson moved automatically. Protective instinct exploding violently through him. But Martin only pulled out a folded document. He placed it carefully onto the table. Tina frowned slightly. What is that? Martin looked directly at Anderson. Then softly said the words, changing everything again. Proof your mother didn't fall accidentally. Silence. Complete silence. Anderson stopped breathing instantly. Tina's face drained of color. Martin's eyes darkened coldly. She was pushed. The world tilted violently beneath Anderson's feet. Because suddenly, the past wasn't finished destroying them yet. Anderson stared at the documents without touching them. Because suddenly, he was afraid. Not of violence. Not of Martin. Of truth. Rain hammered harder against the windows while silence swallowed the entire house. Tina looked equally frozen. Pale. Terrified. Martin stood near the doorway watching both of them carefully. Anderson finally spoke. His voice sounded dangerously calm. Explain. Martin smiled faintly. Coldly. I spent years investigating the company incident. Tina's breathing became uneven immediately. Because nobody ever talked about that day anymore. Not properly. Too painful. Too ugly. Martin walked slowly toward the table. Then opened the file carefully. Inside. Witness statement, security reports, employee testimonies, photographs. Anderson's stomach twisted violently. Because his mother's name appeared everywhere. Martin tapped one document lightly. The official report said she slipped. His eyes lifted slowly toward Anderson. That was a lie. Something dark moved violently inside Anderson's chest. Tina stepped closer shakily. Martin. He ignored her. There was an argument before the fall. Anderson's jaw tightened painfully. With who? Martin's expression sharpened. Raymond Carter. Tina physically flinched. No. Martin pulled another paper forward calmly. Multiple workers heard shouting. Tina shook her head immediately. My father would never. Your father denied compensation afterward. The sentence struck brutally. Because that part was true. Tina knew it. Always knew it. Martin continued softly. Do you know why? Fear crawled through Tina's chest. Because suddenly, memories returned. Her father coming home pale that night. His trembling hands. The drinking afterward. The guilt. God. No. No. Anderson looked toward Tina slowly. Pain spread visibly across his face now. Not anger yet. Worse. Dread. Tina. Her eyes filled instantly. I didn't know. Martin watched everything carefully. Then quietly added. He pushed her during the argument. The room exploded into silence. Anderson stopped breathing entirely. Tina's knees nearly gave out. No. The denial sounded broken. Weak. Martin slid one final paper across the table. A witness finally came forward. Anderson's hands shook slightly as he grabbed the statement. The words blurred briefly before focusing again. Supervisor Raymond Carter grabbed her arm during the argument. She lost balance near the staircase. Anderson's chest physically hurt now. Because suddenly, his entire life rearranged itself around one horrifying truth. His mother didn't fall accidentally. Someone caused it. Someone connected to Tina. Tina cried openly, now shaking her head repeatedly. My father isn't violent. Martin's eyes darkened. Negligence killed her either way. The sentence landed brutally. Because even if Raymond didn't intentionally murder Anderson's mother, he still buried the truth afterward. Still abandoned her. Still let her die without justice. Anderson slowly lowered the papers. Emotion disappeared completely from his face. That frightened Tina most. Because Anderson only became this still when rage moved beyond words. Andy. His eyes lifted toward her. God. The pain inside them shattered her instantly. Not hatred. Heartbreak. Because suddenly, everything between them became tangled with blood again. Anderson looked away first. Like seeing her physically hurt. Martin noticed immediately. Interesting. Even now. Anderson loved her more than revenge. Martin hated that. So he pressed harder. Your father ruined his mother's life. Stop, Tina whispered. Martin ignored her. He buried the truth and let a poor woman take the blame alone. Martin, please. Anderson's breathing became uneven now. Violence crawled visibly beneath his skin. Because every buried wound inside him suddenly reopened at once. The hospital begging for help, mansion gates, his mother dying, Tina's father connected to all of it. God. The rage hurt. Tina stepped toward Anderson desperately. Listen to me. But Anderson stepped backward immediately. The movement destroyed her. Because it felt exactly like years ago. Him leaving again. Tina. His voice sounded wrecked now. Did you know? The question nearly killed her. No. She answered instantly. Truthfully. I swear. Anderson believed her. That was the problem. He believed her completely. Which somehow hurt even worse. Because now he stood between loving Tina and hating what her family did to his mother. Martin watched the conflict destroy Anderson silently. Then quietly twisted the knife deeper. Funny, isn't it? Anderson's eyes darkened instantly. The only woman you ever loved. Martin smiled coldly. Came from the family that destroyed yours. Tina gasped softly. Stop doing this. Martin finally looked toward her. Pain cracked visibly through his calmness now. No. His voice lowered dangerously. He deserves the full truth. The room became suffocating. Anderson suddenly grabbed the edge of the table hard enough to crack the wood slightly. Tina's heartbeat stopped. Because she saw it. The loss of control. The rage. Martin saw it too. Still. He didn't stop. You know what's pathetic? Martin whispered. She still chose you anyway. Anderson's head snapped toward him instantly. She loves you even after learning this. The words hit Anderson brutally. Because yes. Tina stood there crying for him. Not defending herself. Him. And somehow. That made everything more unbearable. Tina reached for Anderson instinctively. But the moment her fingers touched his arm, he flinched. Tiny movement. Barely visible. Still. It shattered her completely. Because for the first time, Anderson recoiled from her touch. Pain exploded through her chest instantly. Andy. His eyes closed briefly. God. He hated himself for that. But suddenly everything hurt too much. Her father. His mother. Love. Blood. Eli upstairs innocent in the middle of all this destruction. Anderson slowly looked toward Tina again. Tears burned visibly in her eyes now. He wanted to hold her. Kiss her. Protect her. And scream at the world simultaneously. The contradiction was tearing him apart. Martin watched the emotional devastation carefully. Then quietly delivered the final blow. Your mother died because people like the Carters believed poor women were disposable. Silence. Anderson's expression changed instantly afterward. Something colder entered him. Not grief anymore. Something darker. Tina saw it immediately. Fear slid violently through her chest. Because she recognized that look. The same look he wore years ago before disappearing into darkness. No, she whispered shakily. Anderson looked toward her slowly. His voice came quiet. Deadly calm. I need to talk to your father. Tina's face lost all color. Because deep down, she already knew this conversation might destroy everything forever. You can't go near my father. Tina's voice shook violently through the room. Anderson stood motionless near the table, rain-shadowed darkness clinging to him again while the documents remained scattered between them like landmines. Martin stayed silent now. Watching. Waiting. Because this was the moment he wanted, love colliding directly with revenge. Anderson slowly lifted his eyes toward Tina. I have to. No. She stepped in front of him instantly. Desperate. You're angry. I'm beyond angry. The terrifying calmness in his voice chilled her completely. Tina grabbed his wrist tightly. Please. God. That word again. It still affected him too much. Anderson shut his eyes briefly. Trying to breathe. Trying not to drown in memories. His mother coughing blood. Hospital lights. begging for help outside mansion gates. Now suddenly, Raymond Carter standing somewhere inside all those memories too. The pain felt unbearable. Tina's tears fell harder. My father made mistakes. Anderson laughed once. Coldly. Mistakes. The bitterness in his voice hurt her. He left her to die. No. He hid the truth. Every word carried years of buried grief. Tina shook her head desperately. He isn't evil. Anderson's eyes darkened violently. My mother still died. Silence crashed between them. Because no matter how complicated the truth became, that fact never changed. Tina looked completely shattered now. Caught between two people she loved. Her father. Anderson. Blood against love. The cruelest kind of war. Martin finally spoke quietly from behind them. See. Tina turned toward him immediately. You need to leave. Martin ignored her completely. This is exactly what I warned you about. Anderson's expression turned lethal instantly. You should stop talking. Martin smiled faintly. Or what? The room suddenly felt dangerous again. Tina immediately stepped between them. No. Her voice cracked sharply. No more violence. Anderson looked down at her. At the tears. At the fear. And suddenly, he realized something horrifying. Tina was scared he might become the monster everyone else believed he already was. That realization physically hurt Tina. Her fingers tightened against his shirt desperately. If you go after my father like this. She struggled to breathe properly. I'll lose you again. The sentence hit him brutally. Because deep down, Anderson knew she wasn't talking about death. Worse. Darkness. Hatred. The version of him revenge created. Anderson looked away briefly. Conflict tore visibly across his face now. Martin watched everything silently. Then quietly added fuel again. Your mother never got justice. Tina snapped instantly. Stop. The scream stunned the room silent. Tina turned toward Martin, breathing unevenly now. You wanted this. Martin's expression hardened slightly. No. Yes. Tears streamed harder down her face. You brought those papers here to destroy him. Martin looked toward Anderson coldly. He deserves the truth. No, Tina whispered brokenly. You wanted revenge too. Silence. Because deep down, that was true. Martin hated Anderson enough to weaponize pain itself. And Tina finally saw it clearly now. The manipulation. The jealousy. The obsession. Martin's calm mask slipped slightly. I loved you. The rawness in his voice startled her. You still tried to own me. The sentence landed brutally. Because yes. Martin suddenly understood something terrifying. Tina stopped emotionally belonging to him long before Anderson returned. Anderson watched Tina carefully now. Watching her defend him despite everything. Watching her choose him again. God. That should have comforted him. Instead, it made the rage inside him worse. Because Tina loved him enough to stand between him and revenge. And he didn't know if he deserved that kind of love anymore. Tina turned back toward Anderson desperately. Please don't do this. His jaw tightened painfully. What am I supposed to do? The question came rough now. Broken. Forget what happened to her. Tina's chest cracked at the pain in his voice. Because she knew, Anderson never truly healed from his mother's death. He simply buried the wound beneath violence until now. And Martin just ripped it open completely. Anderson stepped away from both of them slowly. Like he couldn't breathe inside this room anymore. Tina followed immediately. Andy. He stopped near the doorway. Back turned toward her. Rain thundered outside harder now. I spent years trying not to hate you. The confession shattered her. Anderson's shoulders tensed painfully. Now I don't know what to do with this. Tina cried harder instantly. Because she understood. This wasn't about blaming her. It was worse. He loved her too much to hate her properly. And that contradiction was destroying him alive. Tina walked toward him slowly. Then carefully wrapped trembling arms around him from behind. Anderson froze instantly. The contact hurt. Comforted. Destroyed. All at once. You don't have to choose revenge. Her voice cracked softly against his back. You still have us. Us. The word nearly broke him completely. Eli. Tina. Family. The things he never believed he could have. Anderson slowly lowered his head. Emotion swallowing him whole now. Then quietly whispered the most terrifying truth inside him. What if hatred is all I know how to survive with? The vulnerability in that confession devastated Tina. Because underneath all the violence, Anderson still sounded like a frightened broken boy trying not to drown. Tina held him tighter. Then let me teach you something else. God. That nearly destroyed him. Martin watched the scene silently from across the room. And for the first time, he realized he had already lost. Not because Anderson was stronger. Because Tina loved him in a way logic could never compete against. And people destroyed by that kind of love became dangerous. Martin slowly looked toward the staircase upstairs. Toward Eli's room. Then back toward Anderson. And suddenly, something colder than jealousy settled inside him. If Tina would never willingly choose him, then maybe Anderson needed to lose everything again. The same way Martin was losing everything now. Quietly. Almost invisibly. Martin reached for his phone. And somewhere else across the city, men already started moving toward Tina's house with guns. Anderson felt it before it happened. Instinct. Years of surviving violence sharpened certain senses inside him until danger practically breathed against his skin before arriving. Tina still held him from behind softly while rain battered the windows. Martin stood silently across the room pretending calmness. But something felt wrong. Too still. Too quiet. Anderson's eyes slowly lifted toward the darkened front window. Then instantly narrowed. Movement. Outside. His entire body stiffened violently. Tina noticed immediately. Andy. His voice came low. Deadly. How many people did you bring here? Martin frowned slightly. What? Anderson turned fully toward him now. The softness disappeared from his face instantly. What did you do? Tina's heartbeat exploded. Because suddenly, the atmosphere felt lethal. Martin spread his hands calmly. You're paranoid. No. Anderson stepped closer slowly. Predatory again. You smell like betrayal. The sentence chilled Tina completely. Then suddenly, headlights flashed briefly outside. Several vehicles. Too many. Anderson moved instantly. He grabbed Tina hard and shoved her toward the hallway. Upstairs. Now. The violence in his voice terrified her. What's happening? Move. The front door exploded inward before anyone answered. Gunshots erupted instantly. Glass shattered violently across the room. Tina screamed. Anderson threw himself in front of her automatically while bullets ripped through the wall behind them. Eli. God. Eli was upstairs. Anderson's entire world narrowed into one terrifying instinct: protect them. Two armed men stormed through the doorway. Anderson grabbed the first attacker before the men fully entered. The movement happened brutally fast. 1 second alive. The next. The attacker crashed hard into the broken doorway with Anderson's knife buried deep in his throat. Blood sprayed across the floor instantly. Tina froze in horror. Because for the first time, she saw the real Anderson Kane. Not the broken boy. Not the grieving lover. The monster criminals feared. Anderson ripped the gun from the dying man's hand smoothly. Then shot the second attacker twice without hesitation. Bang. Bang. The body collapsed immediately. The room filled with smoke and screaming silence afterward. Tina stared at Anderson, trembling violently. Because he looked terrifying now. Calm. Efficient. Lethal. Anderson grabbed her face hard, forcing her attention onto him. Listen to me. His eyes burned intensely. Go get Eli. Tina could barely breathe. Andy. Another gunshot shattered the kitchen windows. Anderson instantly shoved her toward the stairs again. Now. She finally moved. Running. Crying. Terrified. Anderson turned toward Martin slowly afterward. The rage in his eyes looked inhuman. You set this up. Martin's face had gone pale now. What? You called someone. I didn't know. Anderson slammed him violently against the wall. The entire house shook. Martin gasped painfully as Anderson's hand closed around his throat. You brought danger to my son. The possessiveness in his voice sounded terrifying. Martin clawed weakly at Anderson's wrist. I swear. Gunfire erupted outside again. More men approaching. Anderson released Martin immediately. Not because mercy existed. Because Eli mattered more. Anderson grabbed another weapon from beneath his coat quickly. Martin stared at him in shock. How many guns do you carry? Anderson didn't answer. Because footsteps thundered outside already. 3. No. 4 men. Professionals. Anderson moved toward the hallway instantly. Then stopped beside Martin briefly. His voice dropped low. If Tina or Eli get hurt tonight. Pure hatred filled his eyes. I will bury you alive. Martin believed him completely. Upstairs. Tina burst into Eli's room shaking violently. The little boy sat upright in bed, terrified by the noise. Mom. Gunshots echoed again downstairs. Eli started crying immediately. What's happening? Tina grabbed him tightly. It's okay. Lie. Nothing was okay. The house suddenly felt like a battlefield. Anderson's voice roared downstairs. Then screaming. Then another gunshot. Tina physically trembled harder. Because somewhere beneath the terror, she realized something horrifying. Anderson was fighting for them. Like they already belonged to him completely. Eli buried his face against her shoulder, crying softly. Mom, I'm scared. Tina's heart shattered. Then suddenly, heavy footsteps pounded upstairs. Too heavy to be Anderson. Tina froze instantly. Fear consumed her completely. Someone was coming. Fast. The bedroom door burst open violently. A masked gunman stepped inside. Tina screamed, instinctively shielding Eli behind her. The gunman raised his weapon immediately. Then suddenly, Anderson appeared behind him like death itself. The knife slid across the attacker's throat brutally fast. Blood splattered across the doorway. The men collapsed instantly. Eli cried harder. Tina stared in complete horror. Anderson looked terrifying, covered in blood and rainwater. Breathing hard. Eyes wild. But the moment he looked toward Eli, everything changed. The violence vanished from his expression instantly. God. Tina nearly cried harder from seeing that. Anderson dropped the bloody knife immediately before approaching slowly. Carefully. Like he was afraid of frightening the child. It's okay. His voice sounded softer now. Gentler. Eli stared at him, shaking. Did you kill him? The question shattered the room silent. Anderson froze completely. Tina's breath caught painfully. Because how do you answer that? Anderson slowly crouched to Eli's height despite blood staining his hands. His eyes looked wrecked now. Not violent. Ashamed. Yes. The honesty stunned Tina. Eli's small face crumpled slightly. Anderson's chest visibly tightened. But he was going to hurt you. The little boy looked confused. Scared. Anderson swallowed painfully. God. This was exactly why he stayed away all those years. This darkness. This blood. This terror. He didn't want Eli seeing this version of him. Tina watched devastation spread visibly across Anderson's face. Because suddenly, he looked terrified Eli would hate him now. Eli stared quietly for several long seconds. Then softly whispered. You got hurt. Anderson blinked slightly. Blood soaked through his shoulder unnoticed. He hadn't even realized he'd been shot. Tina gasped sharply. Oh my God. Anderson looked down briefly. Then back toward Eli. And suddenly, the little boy climbed off the bed and hugged him tightly. Just like that. Despite everything. Despite the blood. Despite the violence. Eli hugged him anyway. Anderson physically stopped breathing. Because no one ever held him after seeing the monster. No one except Tina. And now. Their son too. Eli cried softly against him. I don't want bad people to take you away again. God. That sentence shattered Anderson completely. Because suddenly, he realized something terrifying. He wasn't the only one afraid of losing this family anymore. The police arrived too late. Of course they did. By the time sirens echoed through the rain-soaked streets, Anderson had already secured the house, disarmed 2 surviving attackers, and hidden every illegal weapon he carried with terrifying efficiency. Years of criminal survival made chaos feel natural to him. But tonight, nothing felt natural. Because Eli saw blood. Eli saw death. Anderson sat silently on the bathroom floor while Tina cleaned the gunshot wound in his shoulder with trembling hands. The house still smelled like smoke and fear. Downstairs, officers moved through shattered glass and bodies while Martin answered questions with carefully controlled calmness. But inside this small bathroom, everything felt painfully intimate. Tina's fingers shook while pressing gauze against Anderson's shoulder. You should go to a hospital. No. The answer came instantly. Too instantly. Tina looked at him with exhausted frustration. You were shot. I've had worse. The casualness horrified her. Because he sounded used to pain. Used to bleeding. Used to almost dying. God. What kind of life had he been living all these years? Tina's eyes burned again unexpectedly. Anderson noticed immediately. You're crying. I almost watched you die. The sentence hit him harder than the bullet. Silence settled between them heavily afterward. Rain tapped softly against the bathroom window while distant police radios crackled downstairs. Anderson looked exhausted now. Not physically. Emotionally hollow. Tina carefully cleaned blood from his skin. Then softly whispered. Eli saw too much tonight. Pain flickered violently across Anderson's face. I know. The shame in his voice hurt her instantly. Because he genuinely looked disgusted with himself. He hugged me after. The confusion in his tone nearly shattered her. Like he still couldn't understand why anyone would love him after witnessing violence. Tina touched his face gently. He's your son. Anderson shut his eyes briefly. God. That word still destroyed him emotionally. Father. Family. Things he never allowed himself to want. Yet now, the possibility existed. Which meant fear existed too. Anderson opened his eyes slowly. I should leave. The words came quietly. Tina froze instantly. No. His jaw tightened painfully. Tina, this is exactly why I stayed away. Anger flashed through her tears immediately. You think disappearing protects people? It does. No, her voice cracked sharply. It destroys them. The truth landed brutally. Because yes. Anderson's absence destroyed her for years. Destroyed Eli too without him even realizing it. Tina grabbed his face harder, forcing him to look directly at her. You are not leaving again. The desperation in her voice physically hurt him. Tina. I mean it. Her breathing became uneven. You don't get to love us halfway. God. That sentence nearly broke him completely. Because deep down, he already loved them too much. Enough to ruin himself trying to protect them. And that terrified him. A soft knock interrupted the silence. Victor entered without waiting. One look at Anderson's wound. Another at Tina's tear-streaked face. Then a long, exhausted sigh. You people are emotionally exhausting. Tina almost laughed through tears. Almost. Victor walked closer, inspecting Anderson's shoulder casually. You got lucky. Anderson looked away. No. Victor's expression sharpened slightly. Meaning? Anderson's voice lowered quietly. They went upstairs. Silence. Victor understood instantly. Eli. Tina. If Anderson had reacted seconds slower, something unbearable could have happened. The realization darkened Victor's expression immediately. Martin. Anderson's eyes turned glacial. I don't know yet. Victor looked unconvinced. You think he ordered this? I think he wanted something. The calmness in Anderson's voice frightened Tina. Because beneath it, rage was growing quietly. Victor studied him carefully. Then softly warned. Don't spiral. Anderson laughed bitterly. They came into her house. A pause. Into my son's room. The possessiveness behind those words sounded lethal. Victor immediately understood the danger now. This wasn't revenge anymore. It was family. And men like Anderson became catastrophic when family was threatened. Victor looked toward Tina. You should take Eli somewhere safe. No. Both Tina and Anderson answered immediately. Victor blinked slowly. Interesting. Tina looked toward Anderson. Fear still lingered inside her eyes. But beneath it, determination too. We stay together. God. That nearly destroyed him emotionally again. Because nobody ever chose danger beside him willingly before. Anderson looked away briefly. Unable to handle the emotion in her voice. Victor noticed instantly. Nobody answered. Because deep down, they all knew Tina staying near Anderson meant danger now. But somehow, the idea of separating again felt worse. Victor rubbed tiredly at his face. I'll increase security. Anderson immediately shook his head. No strangers near Eli. Victor frowned slightly. You trust nobody. I trust you. The immediate answer startled even Victor briefly. Because Anderson almost never admitted trust aloud. Victor looked away awkwardly afterward. You're still annoying. Tina watched both men quietly, then finally understood something important. Victor wasn't just Anderson's mentor. He was the closest thing Anderson ever had to family before Eli. That realization softened something inside her unexpectedly. Then suddenly, small footsteps approached outside the bathroom. Eli. Tina quickly stood. But before she opened the door, Anderson caught her wrist softly. Fear flickered across his face again. What if he's scared of me now? God. That question shattered her. Because the feared Anderson Kane genuinely sounded terrified of rejection from a 5-year-old boy. Tina touched his cheek carefully. He waited for you before sleeping. Anderson stared at her silently. Then quietly. What? Tina smiled sadly through tears. He asked if you were staying. The vulnerability crossing Anderson's face afterward nearly destroyed her completely. Because no one ever needed him before. Not like this. Tina opened the bathroom door slowly. Eli stood there clutching a blanket sleepily. His eyes immediately found Anderson. The little boy hesitated briefly, seeing the blood again. Anderson's chest tightened painfully. Then Eli quietly walked forward. Straight toward him. No fear. No hesitation. Just concern. Eli climbed carefully into Anderson's lap despite the injury. You're still bleeding. Anderson physically stopped breathing again. Because the child sounded worried. Not frightened. Worried. Eli touched the bandage gently. Does it hurt? Anderson looked down at him silently. Then something terrifying happened. His eyes filled with tears. Real tears. The kind grief carved out of broken men quietly. Anderson quickly looked away ashamed. But Eli simply wrapped his little arms around him again. Like loving Anderson was the easiest thing in the world. And suddenly, for the first time in years, Anderson Kane became terrified of dying. Because now there were people waiting for him to come home. Tina couldn't sleep. Not after blood soaked her floors. Not after Eli cried himself to sleep clinging to Anderson's hand. And definitely not after watching the most feared man she knew silently cry because a child asked if he was hurting. The house remained quiet now. Police gone. Bodies removed. Rain softened into distant whispers outside. Still. Tina's chest felt unbearably heavy. She stood alone near the shattered kitchen window wrapped in a blanket while dawn slowly approached. Anderson nearly died tonight. The realization replayed endlessly inside her head. If he moved slower. If he reached Eli seconds later. God. Tina physically trembled again. You should rest. Anderson's voice came quietly behind her. She turned instantly. He looked exhausted. Fresh bandages wrapped around his shoulder beneath a dark shirt while bruises shadowed parts of his face. Still. He was standing. Still checking on everyone else first. Always everyone else first despite what people believed about him. Tina stared at him silently. Then softly asked. How many times has this happened? Anderson frowned slightly. What? Being attacked. Silence answered first. That alone terrified her. Anderson walked closer slowly. Enough. Not a number. Enough. God. Tina's eyes burned again. Because suddenly, she understood something horrifying. Anderson didn't become cold naturally. Life trained him to survive like this. Violence became normal because danger never stopped following him. Tina looked down briefly. I used to think you left because you stopped loving me. Pain flickered across his face instantly. No. The immediate answer came almost harshly. Like the idea itself offended him. Tina's throat tightened. Then why did you never come back? Anderson looked toward the broken window quietly. Rain reflected across his dark eyes. Then finally. Because every place I touched became dangerous. The sadness in his voice shattered her. He wasn't talking about himself. He meant people. His mother. Victor. Now Tina and Eli. Everyone around him eventually bled. Anderson rubbed tiredly at his jaw. I thought distance would keep you safe. Tina laughed softly. Brokenly. You almost got yourself killed protecting us tonight anyway. Silence. Because yes. He would do it again too. Without hesitation. Tina stepped closer slowly. Do you know what I finally understood tonight? Anderson looked at her quietly. You never ran because you didn't love me. Her eyes filled. You ran because you loved me too much. God. The truth landed violently between them. Anderson looked away immediately. Unable to survive hearing his own weakness spoken aloud. Tina touched his injured shoulder carefully. You carried this alone for years. The gentleness in her voice nearly destroyed him emotionally. Because nobody ever sounded sad for him before. People feared Anderson. Respected him. Used him. But pity? Tenderness? No. Only Tina looked at him like surviving all this pain mattered. Anderson swallowed hard. I became someone ugly. No. Tina's answer came instantly. Fierce. You became someone wounded. The sentence physically hurt. Because deep down, Anderson still believed violence made him unworthy of love. Tina saw it clearly now. Every brutal thing he did. Every wall he built. Every cold expression. All survival. Not cruelty. God. How lonely had he been? Tina's tears slipped quietly down her face. Anderson noticed immediately. He always did. You should stop crying. Then stop breaking my heart. The honesty stunned him silent. Tina stepped even closer now. Close enough to hear his uneven breathing. Do you know what Eli did after you fell asleep for a few minutes? Anderson frowned slightly. What? He cried. Pain flashed across Anderson's face instantly. Tina's voice trembled. He thought maybe you died. God. That nearly shattered him completely. Because suddenly, his son feared losing him already. The same way Anderson feared losing them. Tina grabbed his hand softly. You matter to him. The emotion in Anderson's eyes became unbearable. Because nobody had ever needed him this purely before. Not for violence. Not for protection. Just presence. Tina looked directly into his eyes. And you matter to me. Silence exploded between them. Heavy. Raw. Terrifyingly honest. Anderson's chest physically hurt now. Because after years of darkness, Tina still looked at him like he deserved love. How? How was she still capable of that? Anderson whispered quietly. You should hate me a little. Tina almost smiled sadly. I tried. God. That answer nearly ruined him. Because yes. She tried. And failed. Just like he did. The broken window let cold wind sweep softly through the kitchen while dawn light slowly painted both of them silver blue. Anderson looked tired. Not physically anymore. Soul tired. The kind of exhaustion years created. Tina gently touched the scar near his jaw. Who hurt you here? The tenderness in the question stunned him. Nobody ever asked about his scars. They usually feared them. Anderson stared at her quietly. Then softly answered. My father. Tina physically felt her heart crack. Because suddenly, the pieces connected even more. The violence. The rage. The emotional distance. God. He truly grew up surviving war disguised as family. Anderson laughed quietly afterward. No humor in it. He said I looked too much like my mother. Tina's eyes filled immediately. Anderson noticed. Then sighed softly. There you go crying again. This time she actually smiled through tears. Anderson stared at her smile silently. Then something dangerous happened. Hope. Real hope. Not fantasy. Not longing. Hope for a future. A home. Them. The possibility terrified him more than bullets ever could. Because now, he had something real to lose. Tina stepped into his arms slowly. Carefully. Giving him time to pull away. He didn't. Anderson wrapped his arms around her almost immediately like instinct. Like relief. Tina buried her face against his chest listening to his heartbeat. Alive. Still alive. Anderson closed his eyes briefly holding her tighter. God. This felt too good. Too peaceful. Men like him weren't supposed to have peace. Which meant the world would probably try taking it away again. And somewhere across the city. Martin Vale sat alone staring at another photograph. This one worse. Tina in Anderson's arms. Family forming around the man Martin hated most. The jealousy inside him had already turned into something darker now. Something dangerous enough to destroy everyone involved. Martin had not slept in 2 days. Jealousy rotted people from the inside. He understood that now. Because every image inside his head looked the same. Tina crying for Anderson, Eli hugging Anderson, Anderson holding both of them like they already belonged to him. The worst part? Martin knew Tina never looked at him that way. Not once. Not completely. Anderson owned pieces of her soul Martin could never reach. That truth slowly drove him insane. The penthouse remained dark except for city lights bleeding through the windows while whiskey bottles crowded the table nearby. Martin stared blankly at another old file spread before him. Raymond Carter. Tina's father. The company incident. Anderson's mother. All of it. Martin rubbed tiredly at his face. Because somewhere along the line, his hatred stopped being only about Tina. It became personal. He hated Anderson for surviving pain and still being loved afterward. Martin suffered too. Yet nobody looked at him the way Tina looked at Anderson. Like his brokenness deserved tenderness instead of fear. A soft knock interrupted the silence. "Sir." Martin looked up sharply. One of his men stepped inside nervously carrying another envelope. "The information you requested." Martin took it slowly. Then froze. Inside sat an old photograph. A younger Raymond Carter standing beside Anderson's father. Martin's eyes narrowed immediately. No. That couldn't be right. He grabbed the accompanying documents quickly. Business records. Financial transfers. Private meetings. Old company partnerships. The deeper Martin read, the colder his blood became. Because suddenly, everything changed. Raymond Carter and Damian Kane had known each other for years. Not casually. Closely. Business allies. Which meant. Martin slowly leaned back in stunned silence. Oh God. The company accident wasn't random. Anderson's mother wasn't just another worker. No. She became a problem. A dangerous problem. Because she threatened to expose Damian Kane publicly. Martin's breathing slowed dangerously. Then another horrifying realization struck him. Raymond Carter didn't hide the truth to protect himself. He hid it to protect Damian Kane. And Tina. God. Tina had no idea her own father helped cover up the destruction of Anderson's family. Martin suddenly laughed softly. Brokenly. Because fate truly enjoyed cruelty. The woman Anderson loved most belonged to the family connected to his suffering from the very beginning. And somehow, he still loved her anyway. Martin looked back at the photograph quietly. Then another realization hit harder. If Anderson discovered Damian Kane orchestrated everything, the city would burn. Because Anderson already hated his father. But this was different. This meant his mother's suffering, his abandonment, his violent childhood, his descent into darkness. All connected deliberately. Manufactured. Martin suddenly understood why Damian Kane allowed Anderson into the criminal empire afterward. Control. Guilt. Containment. God. Anderson had been manipulated his entire life. Martin stood abruptly pacing the room now. Because suddenly, he held information powerful enough to destroy multiple families. And the terrifying part? A small ugly voice inside him whispered. Use it. He hated himself for listening. Meanwhile, Tina woke slowly, wrapped against Anderson's chest. For one peaceful second, everything felt normal. Warm sunlight filtered softly through curtains while Anderson slept beside her deeply for the first time in years. Tina stared at him quietly. God. He looked younger, asleep. Less dangerous. The hardness disappeared from his face entirely, leaving behind traces of the boy she fell in love with. Emotion tightened painfully through her chest. Because Anderson rarely rested properly. Even asleep. One arm remained protectively around her like instinct. Like losing her terrified him subconsciously. Tina carefully touched the scar near his eyebrow softly. Anderson stirred immediately. Years of danger made him alert even in sleep. His eyes opened sharply. Wild for half a second. Then softened instantly seeing her. Relief visibly crossed his face. God. That ruined her emotionally. You're staring. His morning voice sounded rough. Beautiful. Tina smiled faintly. You look peaceful. Anderson almost laughed quietly. That's probably a first. Silence settled warmly between them afterward. Domestic. Gentle. Dangerously intimate. Tina traced her fingers lightly against his arm. You slept. Anderson looked surprised himself. I did. The realization unsettled him slightly. Because he usually woke constantly. Checked exits. Listened for threats. Prepared for violence. But beside Tina, he slept. Deeply. Like some broken part of him finally relaxed. Tina's expression softened. You feel safe here. The truth hit him harder than expected. Because yes. He did. Anderson looked toward the bedroom doorway quietly. Where's Eli? He woke early. Tina smiled faintly. He's making Victor suffer downstairs. Anderson actually laughed softly. Real laughter. God. Tina missed that sound too much. Then suddenly, a sharp knock echoed downstairs. Not polite. Urgent. Anderson's expression changed instantly. The softness vanished. Predator returning immediately. Tina's stomach tightened. Andy. He was already reaching for the gun beneath the bedside drawer. The movement looked automatic. Practiced. Painfully familiar. Anderson stood quickly pulling on dark clothes while alertness sharpened every part of him. Tina watched silently. Because moments like this reminded her, peace around Anderson never lasted long. Another knock echoed. Harder. Victor's voice suddenly shouted from downstairs. Anderson. Danger. Immediate danger. Anderson grabbed the weapon instantly. Then looked toward Tina. His eyes softened briefly again. Lock the door. Fear crawled through her chest. What happened? Anderson already knew before answering. Instinct again. Trouble. Then he disappeared downstairs. Straight toward the next disaster waiting for them. Anderson reached the living room in seconds. Gun already drawn. Every instinct sharpened. Victor stood near the front entrance breathing hard while Eli peeked nervously from behind the couch clutching his toy car. The moment Anderson saw Eli frightened again. Something dark stirred violently inside him. Victor noticed immediately. Easy. Anderson ignored him. What happened? Victor tossed a thick envelope onto the table. Martin sent this. The name alone turned Anderson's expression glacial. Tina hurried downstairs moments later, stopping instantly beside Eli. What is it? Nobody answered immediately. Because the tension inside the room already felt dangerous enough. Anderson slowly opened the envelope. Photographs spilled across the table first. Old business meetings. Corporate dinners. Private gatherings. Then Anderson froze completely. His father. Damian Kane. Standing beside Raymond Carter. Smiling. Friendly. Years ago. The world tilted. Tina's face lost all color instantly. No. Victor swore quietly beneath his breath. Because he understood immediately, this was bigger than they thought. Much bigger. Anderson grabbed the documents next. Financial records. Company reports. Private agreements. Then finally, one line buried inside an old statement shattered everything. Employee Sarah Hale threatened exposure of unauthorized company transfers connected to Damien Kane Holdings. Sarah Hale. His mother. Anderson physically stopped breathing. Tina stared at him in horror. Because suddenly, the truth became unbearable. His mother didn't simply become collateral damage. She became a threat. Anderson read the next line slowly, each word carving deeper into him. Supervisor Raymond Carter was instructed to resolve the matter internally to avoid public scandal. Resolve. The word felt poisonous. Tina pressed trembling fingers against her mouth. No. Victor looked grim now. Because this explained too much. The cover up, the missing evidence, Damien suddenly accepting Anderson, later the criminal grooming afterward. God. Damien Kane didn't save Anderson. He contained him. Anderson's hands started shaking violently. The papers crumpled beneath his grip. Tina stepped closer carefully. Andy. He looked up. And Tina almost broke apart from what she saw. Not rage. Worse. Complete emotional devastation. Because suddenly, his entire life looked manufactured by betrayal. His father ruined his mother. Tina's father helped bury it. Then Damien dragged Anderson into the criminal world afterward. Not love. Not guilt. Control. Anderson laughed softly. The sound terrified everyone instantly. Broken. Empty. Oh. His breathing became uneven. He made me into this. Victor immediately stepped forward. Anderson. But Anderson barely heard him. Because memories exploded violently inside his head. Damien teaching him violence, being rewarded for brutality, being used as an attack dog, every criminal order, every bloody night. God. His father built the monster himself. Tina touched Anderson's arm gently. He flinched. Not from her. From the memories. Tina's heart shattered instantly. Look at me. Anderson slowly did. Tears burned in her eyes already. This is not your fault. The sentence nearly destroyed him emotionally. Because he spent years blaming himself for becoming cruel. But what if cruelty was taught to him deliberately? Victor looked toward the documents again quietly. Then grimly said, Damien knew your mother was going public. Anderson's jaw tightened violently. He used Raymond. Silence. Because yes. That was exactly what happened. Tina suddenly sank onto the couch shakily. My father knew. The realization physically crushed her. Not only negligence. Not only fear. Complicity. Her father helped hide the destruction of Anderson's mother. Anderson looked toward Tina slowly. Pain spread across his face again. Because despite everything, he still hated seeing her suffer. That contradiction was killing him. Eli suddenly walked closer quietly. Small. Confused. Scared. Why is everyone crying? The innocence in his voice broke the tension brutally. Anderson stared at his son. Then something terrifying hit him. What if Eli someday looked at him the way Anderson now looked at Damien? Fear crawled violently into his chest. Because suddenly, Anderson understood, violence traveled through generations like poison. Unless someone stopped it. Eli looked toward the photographs curiously. Who's that? Tina quickly stood. Baby, don't. But Anderson answered first. My father. Eli frowned slightly. Your dad. Anderson nodded once. The little boy studied the photograph seriously. Then softly asked. Is he why you're sad all the time? Silence exploded through the room. Victor looked away immediately. Tina's eyes filled harder. Because children somehow always found the truth hiding beneath adults. Anderson stared at Eli completely still. then slowly crouched to his level. God. He didn't know how to answer this. How do you explain generational destruction to a child? How do you explain becoming the product of someone else's cruelty? Eli looked worried now. You look hurt. Anderson's chest tightened painfully. Because yes. He was. More than ever before. Anderson gently touched Eli's small face. Then quietly whispered. I think maybe I've been hurt for a very long time. The honesty in his voice shattered Tina emotionally. Eli looked sad immediately. Then hugged Anderson tightly again. Just naturally. Like healing broken people was simple. Anderson closed his eyes briefly, holding his son carefully. Because suddenly, one terrifying truth became clear. He could survive hatred, violence, even betrayal. But if Eli ever looked at him with fear someday, that would finally destroy him completely. Victor's phone rang sharply then. The older man answered immediately. His expression darkened within seconds. What? Silence. Then. When? Victor slowly lowered the phone afterward. The room felt instantly colder. Anderson looked up sharply. What happened? Victor's eyes turned grim. Your father knows you have a son now. Silence. Complete terrifying silence. Then Anderson stood slowly. And for the first time since Tina met him again, she truly became afraid of what he might do next. The room went completely silent. Even Eli sensed it. The little boy slowly pulled away from Anderson, looking between the adults nervously. Who knows about me? Tina's heart shattered instantly. God. He sounded scared. Anderson immediately crouched back down in front of him. No one's going to hurt you. The promise came too fast. Too fiercely. Victor noticed immediately. Dangerous. Because Anderson already sounded willing to kill for that promise. Eli studied his face quietly. You look angry. Anderson forced his breathing slower. Because he couldn't scare the child. Not now. Not ever. I'm just thinking. Lie. He was seconds away from losing control completely. Damian Kane knew about Eli. Which meant leverage, manipulation, threat, Stanger. Anderson understood his father better than anyone. Damian never loved people. He owned them. Used them. Destroyed them when necessary. The thought of that man even knowing Eli existed made something murderous awaken inside Anderson. Victor stepped closer carefully. We need to move. Tina immediately nodded. Yes. But Anderson didn't answer. His eyes remained distant now. Dark. Calculating. Victor saw it instantly. Oh no. The rage was becoming focused. That was worse. Andy. Anderson finally looked up slowly. If Damian comes near my son. His voice dropped dangerously soft. I'll kill him. Tina physically flinched. Not because she thought he was bluffing. Because she knew he meant it completely. Victor rubbed tiredly at his face. We're not murdering billionaires today. Anderson ignored him entirely. Because suddenly, everything finally connected inside his head. His father destroyed his mother. Manipulated his life. Turned him into a weapon. And now. Now Damian might try touching Eli too. No. Absolutely not. Anderson would burn the world first. Tina grabbed his arm tightly. Listen to me. He looked toward her. Barely holding himself together now. You cannot go after him like this. He knows about Eli. The raw protectiveness in his voice shook her deeply. Tina touched his face carefully. And Eli needs you alive. Silence. That hit. Because suddenly, this wasn't only about revenge anymore. It was about staying alive long enough to be a father. The realization visibly unsettled Anderson. Victor immediately stepped in. She's right. Anderson looked away. Jaw tight. Breathing uneven. Victor lowered his voice carefully. Damien wants a reaction. He'll get one. No. Victor grabbed Anderson's shoulder hard. You react emotionally, you lose. The room remained heavy with tension. Then suddenly, Eli quietly tugged Anderson's sleeve. All the violence inside Anderson softened instantly when he looked down. Can I ask something? Anderson nodded once. Would your dad hurt me? The question nearly destroyed Tina emotionally. Anderson physically stopped breathing. Because no child should ask that. Not his child. Never his child. Anderson immediately pulled Eli into his arms protectively. No. The answer came fierce. Absolute. He will never touch you. Eli looked up quietly. How do you know? Because I'll kill him first. The thought arrived instantly. Violently. But Anderson swallowed it back. Instead he whispered. Because I won't let anyone hurt you again. Again. The words slipped out accidentally. Tina noticed immediately. Anderson blamed himself for tonight already. For the blood. For the fear. For everything. Eli wrapped tiny arms around Anderson's neck softly. I'm glad you came back. God. That sentence physically hurt. Because Anderson almost never did come back. Not for anyone. Yet somehow. This child already loved him without conditions. Victor quietly looked away again. Because even he felt emotional watching this. Ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. Anderson Kane holding his son like something sacred while trying not to emotionally collapse. The world truly had a twisted sense of humor. Tina carefully touched Eli's hair. Baby, why don't we pack a few things? Eli frowned slightly. Are we leaving? Anderson immediately answered. Just for a little while. Eli looked worried. Together. The question shattered all three adults differently. Together. Such a simple thing. Yet suddenly it mattered more than anything. Tina looked toward Anderson silently. Anderson looked back. Then softly. Yes. Eli visibly relaxed afterward. Like that answer solved everything. Children trusted love so easily. God. Adults ruined that eventually. Eli finally wandered upstairs with Tina to pack clothes and toys. The moment they disappeared, Victor turned sharply toward Anderson. You need to calm down. Anderson laughed once. Coldly. My father knows about my son. Yes. And you want calm? Victor stepped closer. I want smart. Anderson's eyes darkened violently. You didn't know him like I did. No. Victor's voice lowered. But I know you. Silence. Victor pointed toward the staircase upstairs. That child needs a father. The words landed heavily. Not a killer. Not revenge. A father. Victor studied Anderson carefully. Anderson, if you start this war now. A pause. You may not survive it. Anderson looked toward the stairs quietly. Toward where Tina and Eli were packing. Home. Family. Love. Things he never thought he'd have. And suddenly, fear hit him harder than rage. Because Victor was right. If he lost control now, he could lose all of them permanently. Victor sighed softly. There's something else. Anderson immediately noticed the hesitation. What? Victor looked grim. The men tonight. His jaw tightened. They weren't Damien's. Anderson froze. What? Victor's expression darkened. They belonged to Morelli. The name changed everything instantly. Anderson's face lost all emotion. Because Morelli wasn't just another enemy. Morelli was war. One of the most vicious crime syndicates in the country. Anderson slowly understood. This wasn't random. Someone hired them. Victor's eyes sharpened. We have a bigger problem. Anderson's voice dropped deadly quiet. Martin. Victor nodded once. Yes. Silence swallowed the room. Then slowly. Anderson smiled. God. Victor hated that smile immediately. Because it meant something inside him finally snapped. Not loudly. Worse. Calmly. Anderson looked toward the staircase one last time. Then quietly whispered. He brought violence into my son's home. Victor's stomach tightened. Because he knew that tone. It was the same tone Anderson used before entire organizations disappeared. And this time, it was personal. Martin knew the moment he lost control of the situation. The phone call came just after sunrise. One of the hired men survived long enough to speak before disappearing. And the message he delivered chilled Martin completely. Kane knows. Silence filled the penthouse afterward. Martin stood near the massive windows staring at the city beneath him while dread slowly replaced rage. Because suddenly, this wasn't jealousy anymore. It was survival. Martin never intended for the attack to go that far. At least that's what he kept telling himself. He only wanted to scare Anderson. Pressure him. Push him away from Tina. But Morelli's men were animals. And once blood entered the equation, everything spiraled beyond control. Now Anderson knew Martin hired them. God. Martin physically felt fear for the first time in years. Because everybody knew one thing about Anderson Kane. He forgave nothing involving family. And now there was a child involved. Martin poured whiskey with shaking hands. The realization finally hit fully. He accidentally gave Anderson something far more dangerous than revenge. Purpose. Meanwhile, Anderson sat silently inside Victor's armored vehicle while rain streaked across the windows. The city blurred past unnoticed. His mind stayed fixed on only one thing: Martin brought killers into Eli's home. His son's home. The thought replayed endlessly. Calmly. That was the terrifying part. Not rage. Not screaming. Cold certainty. Victor drove beside him quietly. Watching. Waiting. Because Anderson hadn't raised his voice once since learning the truth. And that meant disaster was coming. You're thinking too quietly. Anderson stared ahead. He saw Eli. Victor's grip tightened slightly on the steering wheel. Yes. He heard gunshots. Silence. He cried. God. The heartbreak inside those simple words unsettled even Victor. Because Anderson genuinely sounded destroyed by that. Victor carefully said. The child still loves you. Anderson laughed softly. Brokenly. That's exactly why I'm dangerous right now. The honesty chilled the car silent. Because yes. Love made Anderson catastrophic. Victor already knew. He just hoped Anderson realized it too. Anderson leaned back slowly, closing his eyes briefly. Then memories surfaced violently again. Eli hugging him despite the blood. You came back. I don't want bad people taking you away again. God. Nobody had ever trusted him this completely before. That trust now owned pieces of Anderson permanently. Victor finally asked quietly. What are you planning? Anderson opened his eyes slowly. Darkness lived there now. Controlled darkness. The same thing my father taught me. Victor immediately frowned. And what's that? Anderson's voice dropped dangerously calm. Make sure the people threatening your family never do it twice. The air inside the vehicle became heavy instantly. Victor exhaled slowly. There it is. Anderson looked toward him. What? The monster. Silence. Then softly. You know what scares me? Victor waited. You still call me that after seeing Eli love me anyway. God. That nearly hurt. Because Victor suddenly realized, Eli might genuinely become the only thing strong enough to keep Anderson human. Which also meant hurting Eli would unleash something irreversible. Victor pulled into the underground garage quietly. We do this smart. Anderson exited the vehicle without answering. Rainwater dripped from his dark coat while armed guards immediately stepped aside seeing him approach. Fear followed Anderson naturally now. But tonight, something felt different. Sharper. Colder. Even the guards noticed. Victor followed behind slowly. Don't kill Martin emotionally. Anderson stopped walking. Then looked over one shoulder. What? Victor's expression remained serious. You kill him now, Tina will never forgive you. The sentence landed heavily. Because yes. Despite everything, Tina once cared for Martin. Anderson shut his eyes briefly. God. Why did love make revenge so complicated? Victor stepped closer, lowering his voice. You want a future with her? Anderson's jaw tightened. Yes. Then don't become the reason she fears you. Silence followed. Long silence. Because deep down, that fear already haunted Anderson constantly. Tina saw him kill someone. Eli saw blood on his hands. How long before love turned into fear too? The thought physically hurt. Victor softened slightly. You know what separates you from Damien? Anderson laughed bitterly. Nothing. Yes. Victor's voice sharpened instantly. Everything. Anderson looked away. Unconvinced. Victor pointed toward him hard. You're afraid of hurting your son. Silence. Damien enjoyed hurting you. The truth struck brutally. Because yes. Anderson spent years terrified of becoming his father that he never noticed the biggest difference between them. Damien destroyed people he loved. Anderson destroyed himself trying to protect them. Victor continued quietly. You know why Eli hugged you after the shooting? Pain crossed Anderson's face instantly. Because children know the difference between monsters. A pause. And wounded men pretending to be monsters. God. That sentence nearly broke something inside him. Because suddenly, Anderson realized Eli never looked at him with fear. Not once. Even after violence. The child looked at him with sadness instead. Like he already sensed Anderson carried pain everywhere. Victor looked toward the elevators. Now breathe. Anderson frowned slightly. What? Victor's expression turned grim. Because Tina just called. Fear immediately replaced rage inside Anderson. What happened? Victor handed him the phone silently. Tina sounded terrified on the other end. Andy. His heartbeat stopped. What? Silence. Then her voice cracked. My father is gone. Everything inside Anderson went cold instantly. Tina continued shakily. There's blood in his office. The world stopped. Because suddenly, this war was no longer beginning. It had already started. Tina was shaking so badly she could barely hold the phone. Anderson heard it instantly. Fear. Real fear. Not only for her father. For him too. Stay where you are. His voice came sharp. Protective. Deadly calm. Tina stood inside her father's office unable to breathe properly while police officers moved around the room behind her. Blood stained the carpet near the overturned desk. A broken lamp lay shattered beside the wall. And Raymond Carter was gone. Just gone. No body. No explanation. Only blood. Tina. Anderson's voice grounded her slightly. Look at me. I can't. Her breathing became uneven again. There's too much blood. Anderson's chest tightened violently. Because despite everything, he hated hearing her afraid. Are you hurt? No. Eli. He's with Victor's men. Good. At least the child was safe. For now. Anderson closed his eyes briefly. Thinking fast. Too fast. Because this situation smelled wrong. Very wrong. Victor watched him carefully nearby. What? Anderson's eyes darkened. This isn't random. No. Nothing about this felt random anymore. Damien Kane. Martin. Morelli. Raymond disappearing right after the truth surfaced. No coincidence existed here. Anderson grabbed his coat immediately. Victor caught his arm. Think first. He has Tina. The possibility came instantly. Violently. Victor's jaw tightened. Or Damien does. Silence. God. That was worse. Because if Damien Kane truly connected all these pieces together, then Raymond Carter wasn't disappearing. He was being erased. And anyone close to the truth would be next. Anderson looked toward Victor sharply. Lock everything down. Victor nodded once immediately. Already moving. Anderson. He stopped. Victor's voice lowered carefully. If Damien is involved. A pause. You cannot approach him emotionally. Anderson laughed quietly. Coldly. My father taught me not to. The answer unsettled Victor deeply. Because suddenly, Anderson sounded too much like Damien. Controlled. Ruthless. Prepared for war. 20 minutes later, Anderson arrived at the Carter building surrounded by armed security. Police officers immediately stiffened seeing him approach. Fear moved through the hallway almost visibly. Because Anderson Kane walking toward a crime scene never meant peace. Tina saw him instantly. And broke. The moment Anderson entered the office, she rushed toward him without thinking. Straight into his arms. Anderson caught her automatically. Protectively. Her trembling body against his chest awakened something dangerously violent inside him again. Because someone caused this fear. Someone made Tina cry like this. Anderson's arms tightened around her instinctively. I'm here. The quiet promise nearly shattered her. Tina buried her face against his chest, breathing unevenly. He disappeared. Anderson gently touched the back of her head. We'll find him. The certainty in his voice comforted and frightened her simultaneously. Because Anderson sounded ready to destroy anyone responsible. The office remained chaotic around them. Police photographs. Detectives. Blood. But for one moment, none of it mattered. Only Tina shaking in his arms. A detective approached cautiously. Mr. Kane. Anderson slowly looked up. Instant tension filled the room. What? The detective swallowed visibly. We need to ask you some questions. Victor immediately stepped forward from behind. About what? The detective hesitated. Then carefully. There were witnesses who saw Kane vehicles near the building earlier. Silence exploded instantly. Tina froze. Anderson's expression didn't change. That was more terrifying. Victor immediately understood. A setup. Anderson spoke quietly. You think I took him? The detective looked uncomfortable now. We're exploring possibilities. Anderson stepped away from Tina slowly. Predatory calm settling over him again. Do I look stupid enough to kidnap someone immediately after learning new evidence? Nobody answered. Because honestly, no. This looked too obvious. Too convenient. Anderson looked toward the bloodstain silently. Then something caught his attention. A small silver object partially hidden beneath the desk. His eyes narrowed immediately. Recognition hit instantly. Morelli. The silver coin belonged to Morelli Syndicate. Anderson's jaw tightened violently. Not random. Definitely not random. He crouched slowly, picking it up. Victor saw it too. Shit. Tina frowned slightly. What is that? Anderson stood carefully, turning the coin between his fingers. Then looked toward the detective. You're asking the wrong questions. The detective stiffened. What does that mean? Anderson's eyes darkened. This office was cleaned professionally. Silence. Victor immediately understood too. Because yes. The blood pattern looked wrong. Controlled. Deliberate. Not chaotic enough for a kidnapping struggle. Anderson pointed toward the desk calmly. He left alive. The detective frowned. How do you know? Anderson's voice lowered dangerously. Because whoever staged this wanted fear. His fingers tightened around the silver coin. Not death. Tina stared at him quietly. Because suddenly, he no longer looked like a grieving son. He looked terrifyingly intelligent. Like years inside darkness taught him how evil people thought. Anderson slowly turned toward Tina again. Then softly asked. When did you last speak to your father? She swallowed hard. Last night. What did he say? Tina closed her eyes briefly, remembering. He sounded scared. That immediately sharpened Anderson's focus. Scared of what? Tina hesitated. Then whispered. He said there were things about your mother I didn't understand yet. The room went silent again. Victor cursed quietly under his breath. Because suddenly, Raymond Carter might have been preparing to confess everything. Which meant someone silenced him first. Anderson's eyes became glacial. Damien. The name came out like hatred itself. Tina touched his arm carefully. Andy. But Anderson was already spiraling somewhere darker. Because now the truth was becoming clearer. His father didn't only ruin his mother. He was still cleaning up the aftermath years later. Victor stepped forward immediately. We move Tina and Eli now. Anderson nodded once. No argument. No hesitation. Because suddenly, this wasn't just revenge anymore. It was survival. The detective tried again carefully. Mr. Kane, if you know something. Anderson looked toward him. Cold enough to freeze the room. When I know something. Silence. You'll know too. Then he grabbed Tina's hand firmly and walked out. The police did not stop him. Nobody dared. And as Tina followed him through flashing lights and terrified whispers, she realized something terrifying. Anderson Kane was no longer running from darkness anymore. He was walking straight toward it. And this time, he intended to drag the truth out by force. The rain grew heavier by the time they reached Victor's estate. Thunder rolled across the dark sky while armed guards opened the gates immediately for Anderson's convoy. Tina sat silently beside him in the back seat, holding Eli tightly against her chest. The little boy had fallen asleep halfway through the drive, exhausted from fear and confusion. Anderson kept glancing toward him every few seconds. Checking his breathing. Checking the windows. Checking everything. Tina noticed. Of course she noticed. You're scared. The words came softly. Anderson didn't deny it. Yes. The honesty surprised her. He looked out the rain-covered window quietly. I know what men like my father do when they lose control. A chill slid through Tina instantly. Because the way Anderson said father sounded like poison. Not family. Not love. Just history soaked in pain. Victor's estate finally appeared through the storm. Massive iron gates. High walls. Security everywhere. A fortress. Anderson exhaled slightly the moment they entered. Tina noticed that too. This place is safe. Anderson nodded once. As safe as it gets. Victor was already waiting near the entrance when they stepped out. His eyes immediately checked. Tina Eli Anderson. Then finally rested on the dried blood staining Anderson's sleeve again. You still look terrible. Anderson ignored him completely. Any updates? Victor's expression darkened. Your father called. Silence. Everything inside Anderson turned cold instantly. When? 10 minutes ago. Tina's heartbeat quickened violently. Victor looked toward her carefully. He specifically asked if Tina and the child were with you. Fear crashed through the room instantly. Eli stirred sleepily in Tina's arms, sensing the tension. Anderson's jaw tightened so hard it hurt. He said Eli. The room froze. Victor nodded slowly. He knows the boy's name. God. No. Anderson physically felt rage crawl beneath his skin like fire. Because Damien knowing Eli existed was already dangerous. Knowing his name. That meant surveillance. Investigation. Interest. Absolutely not. Tina saw the shift immediately. The terrifying stillness. Anderson looked exactly like the storm outside now. Victor lowered his voice carefully. He wants to meet. Silence exploded violently. Then Anderson laughed softly. No humor. Just disbelief soaked in hatred. Of course he does. Victor stepped closer immediately. You don't go alone. I'm going. Tina grabbed Anderson's wrist instantly. No. He looked toward her. And God. His eyes looked terrifyingly empty now. Not emotionless. Consumed. Tina's voice cracked. He's manipulating you. Yes. The answer came calm. Too calm. And I'm tired of letting him. Victor swore quietly under his breath. Because this was bad. Very bad. Anderson wasn't reacting emotionally anymore. He was deciding things. That was worse. Tina stepped directly in front of him. You promised Eli. The mention of his son made something flicker inside Anderson immediately. Pain. Love. Humanity. Tiny. Still there. Tina touched his face carefully. You promised nobody would take you away again. God. That sentence nearly broke him. Because suddenly, he remembered Eli hugging him despite the blood. I'm glad you came back. Anderson closed his eyes briefly. The rage inside him battled something softer now. Something Eli awakened. Victor quickly stepped in while Anderson hesitated. We do this smart. Anderson opened his eyes slowly. What's the plan? Victor looked relieved just hearing the question. Because at least Anderson was still listening. We meet Damien on neutral ground. No. The answer came instantly. Victor frowned. And why not? Anderson's expression darkened lethally. Because this stopped being business the moment he learned my son's name. Tina physically shivered hearing that. Possessiveness radiated from him now. Terrifyingly strong. Victor rubbed tiredly at his face. Then what? Anderson looked toward the rain outside silently. Then finally whispered. I go home. Silence. Victor blinked once. What? Anderson's voice lowered. The Kane estate. God. Even saying the words aloud sounded painful. Tina immediately understood. This wasn't a meeting anymore. This was confrontation. Son against father. Past against present. Everything unfinished finally colliding. Victor looked genuinely uneasy now. You haven't stepped inside that house in years. I know. Anderson. Victor's voice sharpened. Men don't walk into Damien Kane's territory unprepared. Anderson slowly looked toward him. Cold. Focused. Terrifying. I was raised there. The room fell silent. Because suddenly, everyone understood what that meant. No one knew Damien Kane better than the son he broke himself. Eli suddenly stirred awake in Tina's arms sleepily. "Daddy." The single word shattered the tension instantly. Anderson's entire expression softened immediately. God. The contrast nearly hurt Tina emotionally. Eli rubbed tired eyes, looking confused. "Why's everyone upset?" Anderson walked toward him slowly. Then gently took the child into his arms. Like instinct. Like breathing. Eli curled against his chest, immediately trusting him completely. Anderson held him quietly for several seconds. Then softly asked, "Do you trust me?" Eli looked sleepy and confused. "Yeah." The simple answer almost destroyed Anderson. Because no one ever gave him trust this purely before. Eli touched the bruise near Anderson's jaw carefully. "You look angry again." Anderson's throat tightened slightly. Then quietly admitted, "I am." Eli frowned seriously. "Mom says angry people make bad choices." Victor almost choked, trying not to laugh. Tina covered her mouth quickly. Anderson stared at Eli in stunned silence. Because somehow, a 5-year-old child just hit him harder than Victor ever had. Eli looked worried now. "Are you gonna make bad choices?" The room became painfully quiet. Anderson looked at his son. Really looked. At the innocence. The trust. The hope. And suddenly, something inside him shifted. Not fully. But enough. Enough to realize revenge wasn't the only thing watching him anymore. His son was watching too. Anderson gently kissed Eli's forehead. Then softly whispered, "I'm trying not to." God. That nearly shattered Tina emotionally. Because for the first time, Anderson Kane sounded like a man fighting himself for the sake of someone he loved. And maybe, just maybe, that meant he still had a chance at becoming something other than the monster his father created.